The Black Widow. Protected by the Black Widow. Good juju. Bad juju. I speak loud on the mic. Knowledge to the people. I speak loud on the mic. Knowledge to the people. I speak loud on the mic. Knowledge to the people. Where the fuck you been? Bomb little niggas again. We buck the trend. It's been a trend. Poor desert. Eagles again. Never say this line again. Never sipping Heineken. Black Panther riding again. Always on my mind to win. I'm where I'm supposed to been. Black Widow protect me. Feds lose again. Nigga, cheat to win. Dope fiend never win. I speak loud on the mic. Knowledge to the people. Protect the youngsters. We poor desert eagles. Never say this line again. Never sipping Heineken is where I win. Black Panther riding again. When naggers break wild, no slack. I'm cutting like an axe. Kick though can't cut in the tracks. Good juju. Bad juju. Never been in the game, but stay crewed up. We answer beepers, can't be tracked, computer hacked. Protect the weaker, don't wear tattoos. But if I did, it be the reaper. Never say this line again. Let truth be where we begin. Christians talking reckless, claiming we born in sin. Capping, let us begin. Pseudo killers to the rescue again. Never tripping, we teaching STEM. Forces those tripping. Choose again to the pseudos. It's always grim, we play to win. God killer again. Always time to defend. Bet the trend. King souls to the king. If I can't chill and be Ken. Malcolm Finch, those niggas for the win. TED talk, bitch walk. Fans time enough for them youngins. Space age, Africans. Anthony with the space. And yeah, jump, we smacking them.
Black African power. What's good? What's happening? A well-organized lie defeats a disorganized truth every time. Woo-hoo-wee, man. Y'all already know what it is, man. Look, man, this is a good one. Man, I wanted to share this whole interview. Nobody's seen the whole entire video, man. With the community of skeptics in sa.neter studios, man. I want to show y'all how we get to it, understanding the roots and how we understand Nile Valley culture, AE ancient Egypt. I just think it's important to get an expert opinion on the subject matter, man. And for so long, we've been kind of like going with the non-experts. You know, that's how it's been for a while. So I wanted to show y'all how the experts do it and, you know, how I get to it and why I stay undefeated. You deal with people that have expertise in said subjects, man. And you learn their ways of communicating it. Big up to everybody in the chat, man. Make sure y'all show some love, man. It's the Friday show. Y'all know how we do it around here. Make sure y'all like and subscribe, man. We need 5,000 subscribers. We 500 away, man, on the community of skeptics, man. I really appreciate y'all for actually sliding through, man. I think it's very, very important that we slide through and that we support each other. Make sure y'all hit the Cash App, man. That's important too. Of course it is. I'm gonna drop the link, man. We try to get at least Friday, we want to try at least get 10 Cash Apps. You know what I'm saying? Get it in there, man, where we can some coffee and a sandwich. Also, man, we got another interview coming up. We're going to have Dr. Wilson on the program. And y'all know how it go. Ain't nothing free in America, man. It's just not. So if y'all want to continue to see interviews, right, with experts, then you got to make sure you support the channel, man. So Dr. Wilson, interviews with the experts, man. Debunk the funk on vaccines information. I know y'all got some questions, man. We're going to make sure that y'all get y'all healthy questions in. But make sure y'all support that, man. If you're over there on the Community Skeptics, man, y'all know what it is, man. Show some support, man. I drop the Cash App link in there, man. Show some support. That interview will be next Friday at 6 o'clock. So y'all wonder where I get my game from, how my game gets so tight. It's because I stay in conversation with the people in said fields. This is important. I mean, very, very important. I mean, very, very important. All jokes aside. All right. So, you know, we want to keep, make sure y'all smash that like button, man. We need to smash the like button. And yeah, man, good morning, everybody, man. Let me let people come in the building in a little bit there. All right. Before we get this thing started, it's going to be a good one. It's a monster show, man. Real technical, no mumble jumble bumble, no bumble jumble jumble, none of that. We not having that. None of that. We going straight for good quality information, man. That's how we like to do it, man. So, you know, there's some more people coming here. It's morning time. I know y'all at work or driving to work or whatever you're doing. If you're in that pseudo killer server, man, show some damn love, man. All right, everybody, I expect the support from the pseudo killer server. Really do. Yep. Let me see. Let me drop that link in there. Let me put it on social media. Get the people in here real quick there. We can get right on with this. Powerful, powerful build. Powerful, powerful build. I hope y'all in the game. Yep. So yeah, man, 24,000 building, man. We got dang enough to get nothing started, man. Make sure y'all the super chats do work. All right. And that like subscribe button works. So make sure y'all do that, man. We had some good conversations yesterday. Gullah came through. He hit him with everything but the damn kitchen sink. Maybe we'll do a breakdown of that of that presentation he did, kind of simplified a little bit. You know what I mean? He hit him with everything. Kitchen sink, the hallway, the chair in the kitchen, the chair in the living room, sofa. Yeah, the patio furniture, the grill on the patio. Then he ran to the dining room, emptied the china closet on him. Yeah, he did all that. He did. He gave it to him 100%. I don't know if they understood it or not, but he gave it to him. All right. So let me see what we looking at on the different channels, man. I know it's morning time. Get the hell up. Let's go. How they say it? They say, get the hell up. Let's see what we looking like over there. Yeah, they capping. Y'all moving slow. All right. For some real Egypt. Not the fake made up Egypt. Not the Egypt where New Age, European style. Nah, traditional African culture. So this conversation is going to be about traditional African culture. That's what we doing. There's a difference here. All right. Let's go. Here we go. Lie. A well-organized lie defeats a disorganized truth every time. Woo-hoo-wee, man. Y'all already know what it is, man. Brother Unk in the house, man. Look, we got a high-level interview here. The interview is so high level that the great doctor wants to introduce himself. Look, how you doing, Dr. Keita? Please introduce yourself to the people, man. We appreciate you coming to starting this event. Talk to us.
Good evening and welcome to everyone. My name is Shomarka Keita, and I'm here today to discuss some aspects of biological anthropology and history of ideas as it relates to biological history and the history of ancient Egypt, origins of ancient Egypt, as well as some other topics related to Africa in general.
Okay, that's what it is. So let's get right to it. Real fast though, Sister Tiffany, I'm going to send you an email, and I want you to make sure you send them a thing to get in. Look, I appreciate everybody that actually support this event, and we're going to have more of this. We appreciate the great doctor for coming in and actually educating us on what it is that we're doing. As we take a look at the landscape, there's a lot of misinformation going on. And I'm so glad that the anthropologists, the bioanthropologists, the scientists are actually coming on the program to have these real conversations so we can get from being confused. It's important. Dr. Keita is very, very well read. And I start to realize that we need brothers like that look like us. We need them in our community to help us see the world the way we need to see it through the eyes of anthropology, through the things that we claim is some kind of way white people. It might have started off being orientated in that way, but we're talking about right now in 2025. We have our own that's going to bring us this information. So Sister Tiffany, can you bring up the slides, please? We can get right into it. And I know, let me see, hold 1 second. I'm gonna get that together, let me get that straight real quick. And
give me a second.
I know, yeah, take your time, we good. So Dr. Keita, how was your day?
Oh, my day was fine. Thank you for asking. It was cool here where I live in Baltimore County, but it was a good day today, basically.
Okay, all right. All right, Baltimore. That's I'm born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Born and raised. So that's we're already there. We've been I've been looking at you for about 17 years. And I tell people how when I first heard you, I didn't actually like what you were saying. I was like, what is he talking about? What do you mean? What does it mean to be African? Like, there's no one way to be African. I said, what is he talking about? Because I had the impression that the African had the big lips and the peppercorn hair, and it was dark skinned, and the Egyptians was jet black and all that. And when you started to break that down, I was like, man, what is he talking about? And it took me, what I had to realize was it took me some time. You are an acquired taste. There's some prerequisites you have to have, just like nature and science. Nature does not allow you to get to the next step unless you understand the step underneath of it, right? It's built on foundations. And for people to really appreciate the conversations, there's certain steps they have to get to. And I use that as a lesson for me that, man, there's a lot of things I need to know to begin to understand what it really means. What it means to be an African American in this world, to even understand our history. So I'm glad you're here. And these slides we have prepared for you will actually, hopefully, kind of tease out the information so to make it palatable for the community. And I really appreciate you. So it's the interviews with the experts. Okay. And we got the great Dr. Keita. And go ahead, Sister Tiff, you can change the slide. Let's go. So we're going to do with genetics, history, and Egypt. Dr. Keita speaks with Brother Section 1, genetics in ancient Egypt. This is a hot topic in our community. So my first question is, what can DNA really tell us about the origins of the ancient Egyptians? Go ahead, Dr. Keita.
Well, the first thing to understand is that the word origins itself can be very problematic If it just means beginnings, uh, it's that's one thing. But if it's supposed to be a beginning that explains something, that's something else. So in terms of population, uh, in terms of the actual people there, what genetics could tell us, if you had all of the data, is that it could tell us something about the earliest layers of population in that area. Uh, and if you, and depending on what time period you have DNA from, let's say if you have it from the 30th dynasty, it may tell you something about that time period. Uh, it might be better to think in turn, ask the question, what can biology tell us? So if we look at biology writ large, meaning skeletons as well as molecular biology, you can get, you may get also another kind of information from that. And sometimes these things may not run in sync. And remember that populations have blended and fused uh, across the face of the earth for quite a long time. And in the case of Egypt, though, we have evidence, hard evidence of people being there from a time that goes back before, for the most part, we would say that modern people had left Africa. So if modern people evolved in Africa 180,000 years ago or 200,000 years ago, it depends on who you talk to. And if they only left 70,000 years ago, or started leaving at that time, or 60,000 years, once again, and these confidence intervals, these estimates have a large range of potential variation. Then we see that, for example, in Egypt, we have skeletal remains from 55 to 60,000 years ago. We have some more from 30,000 years ago. That's Nazca Khader, 35,000 years ago. We have things from places like Wadi Kubaniya and Jebel Sahaba in the late Paleolithic around, 17,000, 18,000 years ago. And then we have material from in between, but notably the beginning of the Neolithic and the pre-dynastic. So when you talk about DNA, we don't have a lot of DNA from, in fact, I don't know of any DNA from the earliest periods. But now let's imagine that we did have DNA. The question would be, can we properly ascertain the geographical origin of that DNA? Now, let me give you an example. The limb ratios of Cro-Magnon in Europe indicate a deep tropical origin, relatively speaking. But the DNA that you pull from Cro-Magnon bones is not the same group of haplotypes. Let's talk about lineages that you find in living Africans. But the limb ratios, which were retained, the tropical body tells you, along with other evidence, archaeology, common sense, let us say, tells you that they came from a tropical place. And the fossil record that we have in Africa, along with the other evidence that we have about DNA on living people, it tells us that, or the best conclusion, or is most consistent with there having been an African origin of modern people. And in terms of Egypt specifically, and we'll talk about this later when we talk about the ancient DNA study that I think a lot of people know about. You'd have to have ancient DNA from the earliest periods from all over the country to get a feeling for what came together in the country. Most importantly, though, it is local people there who synthesize, in a broad sense, the culture. Ancient Egyptian culture did not develop somewhere else and get brought into ancient Egypt. That's the most important thing to understand.
Okay.
The Africanity of Egypt is because the Nile Valley is its place of emergence. And various elements that went into that we can speak about later.
Okay.
Emergence is what makes it African in terms of the culture. But the DNA doesn't tell you and for real, in any sense, who made a particular pot or who designed a particular type of stone tool or who did this or that. And the DNA can't tell you who did it. And these things are not based on DNA. Culture, biology, and culture are two separate things. You can learn any language that you want to, or that you put in the environment of. and that's an important thing. And people can learn your language. So
Mm.
I'll just
Okay.
finish with that. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Appreciate you. Put the slide back up, Ms. Tiff. Appreciate you. I appreciate that answer. A lot of times we get that confused. And all right. All right. So how should we interpret DNA studies that suggest the Egyptian ancestry is either European or African? How should we deal with that, Dr.
Well,
K?
I don't know. I don't know studies that if you look at all of the DNA studies that have been done on modern and earlier Egyptian studies, all of the biological studies, all of the genetic type studies. Now, genetic studies are mirror DNA. You have genetic studies on the serogenetics of living people, but you had some on mummies that were done a long time ago. You have people have pulled sickle cell anemia, evidence for sickle cell anemia out of one mummy that I know about, early proto-dynastic remains. Uh, in terms of ancient DNA, we know about the Schwannemann study. I don't know. I hear that there are going to be some more ancient DNA studies that are done. But now, if we look at the living population of Egypt, and let's focus on just one particular type of DNA, Y chromosome DNA from the male specific region of DNA. When you look at that, you see a population, yes, that's mixed, but you see a core population clearly that is rooted there in northeastern Africa, and we know that those lineages emerged in northeastern Africa, so we don't have to think twice about that. By the time you get to today in Egypt, or for that matter, even maybe 2,000 years ago, we have to remember how old Egypt is and where it is. We have a population that has a lot of different elements in it, and that does not change one bit the origins of the culture. Let's do a little comparison here. And most of the audience here knows about the pre-dynastic of Egypt, which is where the basis of Egyptian culture is. And before that, you have to talk about hunters on the Nile River, and you have to talk about pastoralists from the Sahara. These things merge in the Nile Valley. For example, when you look at Badarian pottery, it has a black top, which everybody probably is familiar with, and it has a rippled finish. Well, the earliest rippled pottery in Africa comes from the Sudan, and the earliest blacktop pottery comes from the western desert of Egypt. In the Badarian pottery, we see a synthesis of these two ideas in terms of ceramics. If you want to use ceramics as some sort of a marker, and I think you can. You don't find Badarian pottery in Palestine, in India, in Norway, or in Miami. You find it in El Badari and southern in middle to southern Egypt. Uh, so I think that's the most important thing to understand. When you look at the modern population, you see a wide range of genetic variation and with a plurality that, in terms of Y chromosome, a plurality to 50% that clearly is African, African in origin. So the Y chromosome, you find a bit of haplogroup A, a bit of haplogroup B, mainly haplogroup E, but you find other things that came in because you're looking at the modern population. And Egypt is at the crossroads. Again, though, I want to emphasize that when you look at the early, and I'll probably be repeating myself, when you look at the emergence of the pre-dynastic culture of Egypt, what you see is that initial synthesis of Saharans and people on the Nile. When it comes to domesticated animals, we have sheep and goat and wheat and barley. These are the Near Eastern domesticates. These do become a part of Egyptian life, but they are adopted on terms of the local people, and they actually are incorporated initially into a foraging strategy. The Neolithic, the food production in the classic sense that it's often talked about, is essentially 2,000 years earlier in the Levant, in Palestine. It's essentially 2,000 years earlier. So for those who would like to tell you that, oh, the ancient Egyptians came from Palestine, and oh, and they swarmed over the valley. Well, that's not true. That's not true. If it were true, the ancient Egyptians would have been speaking Semitic, because the earliest farmers, when we do analyses on pre-Proto-Semitic, when you do an analysis of early Semitic, common Semitic, you find the agricultural terms there. And we know that those sites dates to what, 8,000 BP or whatever. So they're earlier than the Badarian. They're earlier even than the Neolithic in northern Egypt. Now, that Neolithic in northern Egypt had some influence from other places, but like I said, those animals and wheat and barley were adapted into a foraging strategy, the strategy of living that was developed along the Nile. That's the most important thing to understand by by local people. Okay, they incorporated it on their own terms. They transformed themselves. They made themselves. So they had agency. Important concept to understand. But another interesting thing, and actually I'm answering some things that I think you'll probably talk to me about later on. What's interesting though is that the words in ancient Egyptian, although the wheat and the barley came from the Levant, came from Southwest Asia, or what we call Southwest Asia, and there's no reason why we couldn't call it extended Northeast Africa, but that's a whole nother conversation, right? That's an arbitrary division that other people made. We don't have to make it, but accepting that. But in any case, the words for the wheat, the barley, the sheep, and the goat in Egyptian, in ancient Egyptian, not what we call loan words. They're not borrowed. Okay, so that means they're Egyptian terms. So that means that they had animals that they were working with, or plants they were working with, and experimenting with. That when they incorporated these foreign things, they already had a name for them because they already had something like it. They weren't doing the same thing. Domestication is a technical term, and it basically means that you have more or less complete control over something. So in the case of animals, they were herding Saharan cattle. Now, new data, new information says that Fred Wendorf, who thought that African cattle were domesticated, they're now saying that they don't buy his thesis for the Western desert. But those cattle were being walked to different places, so they were being managed. But the distinction between managing something like penning sheep, Barbary sheep, which still are not domesticated today, is that you can manage them, but the difference or the definition of something that's been domesticated is that there's been a change in behavior. They need people, in other words, and that they have changed anatomically. Okay, they've changed anatomically. All right, so let's.
Yeah, interesting. We want to get to the next slide, but that piece about how the geography, arbitrary, very interesting changes.
And I want to say something too. Sheikh Anta Diop, who we all appreciate for him reclaiming or recreating or reminding people that Egypt is in Africa, although there were Europeans that said this too, even before him. So it's not totally original, but because he did it in a very political time, in a very specific way, reacting to the way the West had sort of disconnected Egypt, it comes across a certain way. But remember that Sheikh Anta Diop himself said, even though he used the term Black to refer to the Egyptian population across all time and space, even he said that they had begun to absorb whites from the Levant. If you look at the book Black Nations and Culture, or the translated version of that, and some other essays, African Origin of Civilization, he says very, very explicitly that the Egyptian population was Black, but absorbed some whites who infiltrated during the Amrashan period. Well, if you know your prehistory, if you not prehistory, but if you know your early Egyptian pre-dynastic history, the Amrashan is now we call it Nakata 1, but it succeeds the Badarian. So very, very, very early on, even Sheikh Anta Diop is saying, I don't even necessarily know that I believe that, but anyway, he wrote that. So for those who are saying, well, Sheikh Anta Diop says one thing, he says this, read it very carefully. He's using a definition of Black or a definition of African that's kind of like the way we use the definition of Black here. There's no question from a cultural point of view that that this is true. That Egypt stays true to itself. Whenever things get in trouble, the original constitution that was formulated in Dynasty One, the whole value system around Ma'at, they always return to that, the so-called first intermediate period before the 12th dynasty. What happened? 12th dynasty, the kings reassert themselves, and they always come from the south. They always reassert themselves from the south. And then the second intermediate period, the 17th dynasty pharaoh who, or family, they come up from the south. Amhos and his folk, they're from Thebes, they're from the south, and they reassert. So it's almost like the South was a repository of the culture. Now, people don't write about it that way, and some people might take, say that's a simple way to say it, but it's still accurate based on the historical data. What that means, I'm not prepared to say, but you could imagine that the North was always in contact and was a little bit different than Middle Egypt and the South. And even during the proto-dynastic period, during the period we would call Dynasty Zero, or Nakata 3, there were stations or trading stations, what have you, by the Egyptians in Canaan, in the Levant, in Southwest Asia, what we call the Near East. And anytime you have trading stations, the basis of trade and so forth, you've created a basis for social relations. So no, one should not be surprised if the population takes on, assimilates other people, again, based on its own cultural mores, its own cultural values. I can stand that in contrast to ancient Carthage. Now, we like to talk about Hannibal. Hannibal, fought the Romans, and we see him as a great African leader. And, we've seen the gladiator movies, and, they a mixed population along the coast of Northern Africa. That's accurate, meaning a population with varying phenotypes, skin colors, and what have you. But let's think about Carthage. Carthage started off as what? What did it start off at? A trading station. Now, I may have made a mistake. I published an article on this where I call it a settler colony. That's crude political language and harsh, but it was probably that, or at least a trading station. That's how it started off, if we accept the high date in the 9th century or the 7th century for founding of Carthage. But what was it by the time you get down to 200 AD, 200 BC or 300 BC, and they're fighting or talking to the Romans, and much later on, are they still a Phoenician settler colony? They spoke a Semitic language. Their gods were all from the Levant, okay, in Carthage, but they were on African soil and had been there. In fact, up until, for a very long time, they still call themselves sons of Tyre, Tyre, which was a place in Babylon, even though most of the people who would have been born in Carthage would have never actually have been there. And so you have the local Berber people, local Amazigh, and the question becomes, well, how much did they merge? And we know the population was highly heterogeneous, and I've even commented on that in a paper that I wrote a long time ago, analysis that I did, but other people had made the same observation. I just used a different method. What I'm getting to is this: the populations of both Carthage and Egypt, let's pick a date, 720 BC, 25th dynasty. In Carthage, you had people still speaking a Semitic language with a mixed population, Semitic language, who probably had changed their outlook in terms of their cultural founders and biological founders, in terms of that. I don't know that they would have called themselves Phoenicians. We use the term Punic and what have you, but diverse population, but they were still practicing the culture from the Levant. In ancient Egypt, same date, they were still practicing the culture, population, which was heterogeneous, for the most part African, but now we have Kushite rulers in Egypt. And what are they doing? Practicing their most ancient culture that's local a heterogeneous population, even with foreigners coming from outside of the Nile Valley and even outside of Africa, Syrians and what have you. They're still practicing the culture that grew up on the Nile, and whatever other changes were wrought by whomever got on the throne, they were still to their core Egyptian, perhaps until the Greco-Roman period. In Carthage, what was going on? They were practicing that religion and had those gods that had come from the Levant. But they were in Africa. So it gets to be very interesting about how you define things. Right? So,
Correct. Correct.
So we see Hannibal as a great hero. We call him that. I mean, we always have done that. I don't know how Hannibal looked. I do know that that population was highly variable. I don't know how Hannibal himself looked, but I know that Berber nationalists today, the Amazigh people, who regard themselves as the indigenous people of the region, who speak Berber as opposed to Arabic, for them, Hannibal is not a hero because he fought with local Berber rulers and people like Massinissa. Massinissa, even though some people have said this, I don't think it's been found in text, but his actions would say that he could have said, Massinissa would have said Africa for the Africans. Okay, but anyway, I don't know that he said that. I've made the mistake and not editing something that I wrote where I basically put those words in his mouth when I meant to say that by his actions he could have said that.
Okay.
But we have to always be honest in when we're doing our academic work and so forth. So
and hold on, but I appreciate that, and therein lies the problem that a part of being a bioanthropologist, part of being in academia, and part of being a scientist is the level of honesty, and I appreciate that. So let's move on to the next slide. We're going to deal with that Suleiman study. You kind of touched on it a little bit. I know there were some statements made, some apathetic statements that actually the article say don't make apathetic statements on who the Egyptians are based off the paper, but a lot of people in the community did it. So why does studies based on late period DNA, like the 2017 Suleiman study, give a misleading picture of early Egyptian history?
Okay, now you've answered your question because it's a late period and it's from the north and it's from places, as I published in a paper, and it's also in a book too. It's from a place known to have been trafficked by people from the Near East and then later on Greco-Romans. Okay, in fact, I think this area is near reliquary with papyri that have Greek writing and stuff. I'm not sure. That's the latest period. Now, they did sample across a wide time period also too. So they don't really have a population in the classic sense of something fairly tightly constricted. They have there's an assumption there, and then they use a Bayesian sky plot method to predict back into time, and to say, well, we've got this many data points. And so they're projecting back into time. I think that was dishonest. I don't know how that got by the referees because I can take the I can take the crania from that time period, from the latest date that they have there, and they're not like the Badarians. Okay, they're not like the people who started the ship broke, so to speak. Okay, or the Nakata, early Nakata, and it gets tricky too to understand which is the most who is the most accurate representative. But let's remember that Gamal Mukhtar, the Egyptian who wrote the introduction to the UNESCO History of Africa, Volume 2, he wrote the introduction. While he pointed out, he included Sheikh Anta Diop's essay there. He said that some people would not agree with the way that Sheikh Anta Diop said it, but he clearly asserts the Africanity of Egypt and that the population would have been have a range of colors. And this is an Egyptian. He's dead now. He lived to be very old, I think, if I'm not mistaken. because I think one of my teachers from graduate school actually met him, was on a tour with him many years ago. And this particular professor of mine, Audrey Smedley, you can look her up. She wrote a book, Race in North America, History of a Concept, something like that, which is one of the official books of the American Anthropological Association. She's African American. When she was in Egypt, she said, she was on tour. She said, well, they say these people came from, Southwest Asia, and the tour guide, the Egyptian, I think it was Gamal Mukhtar, because she would have gone with a group of professors. She said, no, they were African, straight up, But being an African doesn't mean that you have a blue-black skin and have a certain singular set of physical characteristics. How could it be? Think about it. If modern humans emerged in Africa 200,000 years ago, they'll just say in round numbers, and didn't leave until 60 or 70 or 65,000 years ago, or you pick your number, they had over 100,000 years to accumulate new mutations. There are different environments in Africa, and now we have a theory that suggests that perhaps there was a polycentric origin of modern humans, that there was substructuring in Africa before people left. So you look at Jebel Irhoud, the remains from Morocco, they're not quite modern, but they're close. And you look at other stuff, Kabwe and whatever, these things are all on the path. So if what we call modern traits emerged in any group and they're sharing genes across this vast space of Africa, you're still going to have some substructuring, right? You're going to have some differences that persist across that time, although the origin is still African. The emergence of modern human is African. Modern human brains are an African invention, for those who want to express it that way. When you get in a bad argument with the wrong people, they say, well, what has Africa given us? If certain people ask you that, you say, go look in the mirror. Just go look in the mirror. That's what Africa has given us. Humans, whether you like it or not. So I would, and I just said that to add a little levity to our conversation. But modern humans emerged in Africa, and living humans have DNA from some of the other so-called archaic Homo sapiens, if you want to call them that, or from another point of view, they're just another race of human beings, of Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens sapiens is predominantly what we are, Homo sapiens sapiens, but we have evidence of DNA from either what some people call other archaic species, or some people would say simply other subspecies at particular time depths. So that's a different type of discussion. So this polycentric notion of modern human origins versus a single population, say in Southern or Eastern Africa, that kind of emerges from what came before and then populates the world, is a little bit, so those are the two competing ideas. And they can work together. You could still have the polycentric notion and still wind up with a single population that becomes the entity, so to speak, if you see what I mean. So That's possible. And let's just remember too, that we should not be surprised that there might be some people in Africa who seem to be more related or more similar to people outside of Africa. I mean, not including any migrations from the Islamic period, from the Phoenicians, from anybody, not anybody coming back at all. We should be able to understand that modern people who left Africa would have left from a particular place. They didn't all get together from all corners of Africa. So there would have been some differences. There would have been some differences between modern humans in different places. So wherever they left from, we should not be surprised that there would be people on the outside of Africa, or some Africans rather, who might be more similar, possibly more similar, more related, or have more DNA in common with some people on the outside than they do with other Africans who were far more distant geographically than being from the same space that they left from.
So you know what? That's one of those points. That's one of those points. Go ahead.
And once you think about that, you have to think about that now. I'm going to use another type of.
All right, go ahead, because that's a serious point.
Let me just use another kind of example. If Black folks from Ohoski, North Carolina, where people have a lot of European ancestry, but they're Black, they call themselves Black at least on most days. If they left and went to a desert, to an island someplace, and they would call themselves African American, that would not be a representative sample of all of the people that call themselves African American. You understand what I'm saying?
I got that.
Okay,
Sure.
so let us remember that the modern humans who left were certainly core modern humans, and certainly had all of that core stuff that makes you modern human in them. But at the level of certain types of DNA, they may have been different. Now, I mean, or rather, they wouldn't have been the same as people in other places. So, and that shouldn't be particularly surprising. We know that if you look at strictly the Y chromosome, which I like to use as a model, we have A and B haplotypes, which arose in Africa, and E group and D for that matter, maybe all of the major Y chromosome haplotypes, but A and B were geographically, or seem to have been more geographically separated, so you don't really find them outside of Africa. But the D haplogroup, or the things derived from the M68, the D and the E groups, haplogroups, you have those in Africa and you have them on the outside of Africa as well. The E probably left later. The point being that there's a commonality for some things, that there's some people outside of Africa or some people in Africa who are on a lineage that's more related to some people on the outside than it is to people on the inside.
So let me jump in real quick.
Anyway, but that should not, and that's way beyond the Shoneman. I've answered the Shoneman question.
Yeah, you did that.
And so, but I was just trying to make a point, a larger point, that that you can model statistically, it makes sense, and what have you. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's one of those points that's counterintuitive when you hear it. That and the way you explained it brings real clarity to it. Because if you make the statement that there's populations in Africa that are more closely related to a population outside of Africa than population within Africa, you're like, oh my goodness, what are you trying to say? That was one of those points that I couldn't quite wrap my brain around it. But I thought you did a great job of explaining that on how vast Africa is and how there are been around. You talk about how the population been around for 350, maybe 200,000 years, depending on who you're talking to, and there's time for mutations to occur and all that, and the possibilities of a diverse population makes sense. And so if the population is diverse, and one just group leaves out of Africa, then of course they could be more related than would be inside. That's very interesting right there.
Yeah, well, yeah. There's actually an article by a man named Yu, a group, Yu and his colleagues, Yu, and it's got a title something like greater diversity between Africans than between some Africans and non-Africans. Last name Yu, so you can find that. So this idea, I mean, I came to this conclusion on my own before I saw that paper, and it's not something there's nothing special about it. It's just that it's not talked about in particular ways, because you have people talking about Africa as a monolith. You have it gets talked about in a certain way. So, if it emerged in Africa, it's African. That's how I look at it.
Got you. Okay.
And if it gets put together in Africa by Africans, it's also African. So if it's that there used to be the Hamitic concept. Well, we'll talk about that later.
Okay. All right, let's get to the next slide, Ms. Tiff. We dealt with the Schuleman. Let's get to the next slide. Yeah. I'm glad you made that clear. At times we struggle. I know I did. Okay, the next question. Oh, let me see. Go back. Go back one, Ms. Tiff.
So that's the Schuneman.
Oh, that's true. Okay, go ahead. All right. So we're in the next section now. My fault. I apologize. Culture and history, section 2. Next slide. Did the ancient Egypt, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, did ancient Egypt develop from local source primarily or from external sources and brought to the Nile Valley? I think you kind of answered that. Do
I
you want to go
answered that
or what?
already. No, no. The answer is no. I mean, the answer is, I'm sorry, the answer is yes. It developed from local sources primarily and integrated things on its own terms into what was there previously. It's just like you know, if you're a farmer and you doing your land, you've been farming for a long time, and then you decide instead of just to grow peanuts, you grow something else. Well, it's still your farm under your control. Or if you decide to take your peanuts and cross them with some peanuts from someplace else, that make them different. It's still your peanuts. You know, they're still local. Now, could you change something to a point where something becomes unrecognizable? Yeah, conceivably, but you know, that's not what we're talking about. And
That's a
also in
great
terms,
point.
even in terms of the history of ideas, you have people like Denon, who went with I think Napoleon to Egypt and all this. Denon, I don't think was a scientist himself, but he said something very interesting that 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 reveals an evolutionary perspective at a time when evolution hadn't been thoroughly. And the language isn't perfect; it's quaint and maybe even crude. But he says something to the effect that the ancient Egyptian, and you're looking at dynastic portraits, ancient Egyptian is the authentic African, with the Negro being an extreme variant. So he's reversed the polarity, so to speak, in terms of his definitions, his defining. And that's just an interesting idea to think about.
Hmm. Very interesting. Okay. Steph, go ahead. Next slide, please. What can skeletal analysis tell us about the possible connections between ancient Egyptians and their neighbors?
Well, if you look at the long bones, you can make an assessment as to whether or not they're cold adapted or warm adapted. Although some people would argue that the skeletal proportions and so forth may also tell you something about adaptations to living conditions. You know, that's something you have to make up your own mind. But the Egyptians have a tropical body plan. And there have been several papers about this. Sometimes it gets expressed in racial language. So there was a paper a long time ago that said their limb ratios were super negroid. Okay,
Hmm.
talking about the early pre-dynastic Egyptians, and then even some later New Kingdom Egyptians in the South. Uh, let's just call this a tropical body pattern. So we know they didn't come from Norway. Okay, so that's important. And the Holocene, I mean, or from the Siberian steppes, which of course nobody says. Craniofacial analysis, the question there becomes on what do you understand your range of variation to be? Well, if you don't have evidence of migration in, then you do have to set a notion about what's indigenous. And so when you do multivariate analyses, the stuff that I do, you find out that the early Egyptians have overlapped greatly with people from like the Sudan, Somalis, and later Egyptians verge in a direction more along, people say in Northwest Africa, but also if you want to call that in a European direction. In one study, in one large volume called Cranial Variation in Man, 1973, W. Howes uses 70 variables, a lot of variables, a lot of measurements, and on a late dynastic Northern Egyptian series from the very latest time. So, you know, you're not going to be surprised to know that in some analyses, it groups with Europeans, right? But also in another analysis, and this is all in the same book, so you can see it, it clusters with tropical people. Now, some interesting characters, not only tropical Africans, but groups like the Andamese, which really shouldn't have been included in the study. But anyway, since they're not players in that scene. The point though, and then when you do look at a plot using another technique, they plot right in the middle. And these are late dynastic Northern Egyptians measured very meticulously many different ways. So what you measure may also give you a different result too. So you have to understand that. You know, it's very important to understand that. Yeah, it's very important to understand that variables can make a difference. So you try to choose your variables that are the most heritable and that cover most of the craniofacial region. And so that's a comment on similarity. Not all similarity necessarily means a close genetic or genealogical relationship,
Correct.
but as long as you have some context for what you're looking at, historical context, no matter whether derived from archaeology or otherwise, you have it's reasonable. You can make reasonable assumptions, and you most certainly can comment on patterns. Now, if you run in an Egyptian skull in a test space or any skull, and it groups with somebody from northern Siberia, then either that person is a foreigner or they're just a very unusual person with unusual personal characteristics. And things like that do happen. Things like that do happen.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. All right. Where you at? Let's get the next slide up. Appreciate that answer. So, oh, wait till she get that together. Okay, here we go. Afrocentric perspectives. And section 3. This is gonna be a good section. Go ahead, next. How do you define an African-centered approach to history, and how is it different from mainstream Afrocentrism?
Okay. I am not an authority on this humanities theorizing theoretical positions. I know the person who wrote the book, The Afrocentric Idea and Afrocentricity. I know Molefe Asante. I know that he wasn't the first person to use the phrase Afrocentric too. I also know that Afrocentric thought or claims have sometimes been related to ideas that basically say that everything worthwhile has come from Africa in a very specific kind of way, uh, oftentimes without the kinds of evidence that would be required to write about this or teach about it and what have you. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, however, so you have to be careful you don't make absolute statements. Now, African centered, uh, so I would say Afrocentricity in the way that Molefe Asante wanted it to be is something that focused on African culture. I mean, sort of from a disciplinary point of view, focused on African culture, values, myths, things of the African world as its subject matter. That's how some people might see it. But clearly, the term Afrocentric gets applied to other things. For example, I'll never forget somebody created a Bart Simpson, a black Bart Simpson, a brown Bart Simpson. So, oh, we got Afrocentric Bart Simpson now, just because he was brown. Okay. Now, African centered might be said to be just an approach that privileges, but Afrocentricity does this too. That 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 privileges or desires to look at things from an African perspective or an Afro-American perspective, as opposed to being written from another cultural perspective. So that would be a part of Afrocentricity too. So what can I give you as an example? Many of the listeners audience here will be familiar with the Afro-American historian John Hope Franklin or other writers, Nell Painter. We've got all kinds of Black American writers now.
Mhm.
Isabel Wilkerson. I mean, I'm just saying, Arnold Taylor from 3 generations ago, Du Bois, who wrote Black Reconstruction. Okay. All right. Now, this is a little tricky because and then all right, so John Hope Franklin, I want to juxtapose John Hope Franklin against uh Vincent Harding. Vincent Harding wrote a book called There Is a River.
Mm-hmm.
There Is a River. John Hope Franklin wrote From Slavery to Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
From Slavery to Freedom was written in a classic academic style, dispassionate, you know, uh, and so we're going to talk about style here. Not that he didn't have his own commitments. I mean, John Hope Franklin's folks were from Oklahoma, so I think his grandfather got burned out in the massacre in 1921, as I recall. And he was a lawyer in Tulsa, I think, at that time or something. Now, Vincent Harding's book, There's the River, though, is written from the point of view, for lack of a better word, of the enslaved person, of the oppressed person. So imagine that you and I, okay, so let's imagine that you're telling a story sort of from the outside, from an
Okay.
outsider's view, even if you're from the inside, but you
Okay.
choose to tell it, in a particular way that makes it sound like you're doing it dispassionately or whatever. You choose that. But then you've got somebody else, your twin brother, who chooses to tell the story as he experiences it, as he sees it. Now you're telling the same story. And we're not talking about telling lies here. We're just talking about perspective. We are talking about perspective. In Vincent Harding's book, There is a River, which I try to read once a year and I recommend it. There are plenty of used copies out there. He's dead now, so it hasn't been redone or updated, or not updated, that's the wrong word. It hasn't been revised or anything, as far as I know. The river that he's talking about is the river of Afro-American life, and it's very specifically Afro-American life. And I think he makes references to things that you may not read in other history books about Afro-Americans. For example, some of the people didn't make it here, not because they jumped off the boat and drowned or died on the boat, but because they blew the boats up. They refused to be enslaved. I didn't know that until I read Vincent Harding's book. Okay. That's a very powerful statement about liberation. Okay. They threw fire into the magazines on the slave ships. Okay. I don't know how often it happened, but even if it happened only once, that's significant. Okay.
Just enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what I want to say about that too,
Mhm.
I'm gonna make a pitch, and you should tell the book company that we made a pitch on this book and that they owe you something. Okay. Common Winds.
Gotcha.
This book was written by Julia Scott, who died, the late Julia Scott, who is one of the best friends of a friend of mine from undergrad school. This book,
Okay.
Common Wind, subtitled Afro American Currents,
Mhm.
the Age of the Haitian Revolution. Let me put it up here. Julia Scott, young man, relatively young
Common
man.
win. I see the
This book,
common win.
Common Winds, Common Wind.
Got you.
In a nutshell, what this book is about is how people networked. And even during the enslavement period between the Caribbean, South America, and North America, how messages were gotten to other people through sailors and through people who were not, they were sometimes free Black people. And just imagine a situation where you have a certain number of people who either buy their freedom or free, and they're carrying newspapers or they're spreading rumors that they hear or information. Because the English planters in Jamaica, the whites who lived in the Caribbean, let's not forget that there were white owned plantations there in South America. They could not understand, well, how were the enslaved hearing this information that the king in Spain said this or that? And sometimes they acted on that information. They planned revolts because they thought the local whites were uh, keeping information from them, right? So the common wind is about something that we need to get into right now, sharing information just like you're doing, but maybe not so much on YouTube. Maybe in church. Maybe you know chit chatting at the local place where people maybe sit down and have their drinks or whatever they do, or on the basketball court, spreading information in the same way that dances when I was growing up would spread from New York
Okay.
to Florida.
Okay.
We'll go from city to city. Say, oh, this is how we do the boogaloo. This is how we do this. This is how we do that. Okay. So I would say that reading the Common Wind, which is something you need to be awake when you read it because it's got a lot of dense information. He learned 3 or 4 languages, went into the archives in Spain, Portugal, France, the Caribbean. He put a lot of, this was his doctoral dissertation. Took it 30 years to get published, even though it became an underground classic. many people referred to it when it was in its dissertation form, but he refused to change certain things that certain publishers at that time wanted him to do.
Okay.
And so he stuck to his guns, and he got tenured professor. He was a professor. I think he died from kidney failure. So take your blood pressure medicine, guys, and don't eat salt. Don't do a lot of salt. Get your exercise, drink your water, and read up on, good diet,
That's what we doing.
exercise, and you still, and it doesn't mean that will, if you're going to get it, you might are going to still get it, but this will help you. Let me just say it that way.
Slow it down a little bit. So, okay, I wanna go back to that. So, what I'm getting from it, Afro-centered, Afro-centric.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, yeah. So what? No. I'm saying. So, what do you consider yourself? What would you say yourself to be? Because I know it's subjective, though. I understand that. So, what do you consider yourself to be if you had to choose?
I would say that I have an African-centered perspective on African history, which means I want to tell it from the inside. In anthropological terms, that would be called an emic view versus an etic view. Emic comes from the word, is the suffix on phoneme. So phonemic is how the thing sounds itself. A phonetic is how we describe it. So phonetic is from the outside. Etic is an outside description. Emic. So etic is when I come to where I grew up, your neighborhood in Baltimore, and I look at it and using my social science training and theories and whatever, or medical training, whatever I use, and I use it to describe what's going on. Emic is when you tell the story. Gotcha. So emic is what Vincent Harding tried to do, and There's the River. John Hope Franklin's book, even though he's African American and has his commitments, don't get me wrong, John Hope was a great man, but it's written in such a way that many academics could have written it the way that he wrote it.
Gotcha.
You see what I'm saying?
I got you.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that, and almost it seems like,
and just because it's written from the inside, I have to say this, doesn't mean that it has to be factually wrong or that it's biased. Now, some cases it will be if it's your point of view. And sometimes, that's why lawyers will let people tell their stories in the narrative, because asking the standard questions just won't get at the feeling and the depth of the circumstance. Okay? It just won't get there. Okay? So you can describe something objectively. Okay? I can describe this cranium here objectively in certain ways. It cannot describe itself. Okay. It cannot describe itself. So this is not a situation where that emic-etic distinction works. That works at the level of societies and people. You can try to tell, though, an emic story. You look at Chris Arrett's most recent book. He's not able to lecture on his book anymore, but this is sort of a broad general early history. Yeah. Broad general. It's a broad general. It's kind of a history of.
All right, we're gonna stop right there, man. Take a little break, man. See that book he pulled up? I remember Jabari lied to y'all and claimed that he talked to Christopher Eric, man. You heard that man just say right there, yo, he's unable to lecture on that book because that man had a stroke a couple years ago, yo. He's now dead, but wonder where in the world. See, y'all don't know that little small in-between stuff. But anyway, man, hit the Cash App, man. This is one of those conversations, man, where experts weighed in on the subject matter, man. All right? It's important to understand how experts see it. If you just stuck on, it's got to look like me, well, he looks like everybody. He look like y'all. Hear what this man is saying. Very, very important, man. I just felt like I wanted to give the crowd, particularly on the sa.neter side, an opportunity to see how an expert talks about Egypt. And I'm talking about a real expert. I'm not talking about a person just talking or acting like it. All right? Just want to show you that. All right? Bet. Hey, Lab 500, knock it off. You got to knock it off sometime. You're always on the hate train for no reason. Show some love, man. I'm going to drop the Cash App, man. Show some love, man. That's how we do it around here. We support. I see Tiffany and them in the chat. Big up to you. Omar, I see you. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. All the pseudo killers in the chat, man. I appreciate y'all, man. Also, man, you want your questions asked, man, go ahead and hit the super chats, man. All right, let me read the super chats, man. We got Omar Reed, man. Appreciate 200 jewels, man. And we got 10 jewels, man. Appreciate you, man. All right. We're going to keep it going, man. The show is going great. All right. It's going to stay going great as long as we keep thinking and stop letting people say anything to us to get their thing off. It's going to stay great because I'm never going. So I want to keep this moving, and it's all good, man. The point was the point. Now, I brought it up because I felt like bringing it up, and that was a tool that the brother tried to use against me when I knew it was a cat. So I just wanted to show y'all how it was a cat. I just found the moment to do it. Now, y'all got to stop playing. So let me move this forward. Man, y'all listen to Interview with the Experts, man. This is something I do routinely. As a matter of fact, man, next week we're gonna have another expert on, and y'all need to support this. All right here. We're gonna have Dr. Wilson on. Interviews with the Experts, man. We debunking the funk on vaccines and misinformation, man. All right, legitimate, all day, every day. This is how we do it. This is how we get out information. Simple as that. Appreciate the brother coming in and spend some time. We're gonna have about 2 hours. Y'all gonna get a chance to ask some questions, man. It's not the flim-flammery, act like I know. No, this is not that. All right. So make sure y'all support, man. Ain't nothing free around here, man. So show some love, man. And let's stay studious, yo. Yeah, come on, proper perspective, man. I don't feel like going into all that, bro. One thing you do know about me, I don't sit up here and make up stuff, bro. All jokes aside, but I can find it. All right, I can go get that. I'm gonna tell you when we was fighting over Black Egypt, it was Smash. It was Smash. Hold on, Smash, Say Cool, Jabari, and me. We was all fighting. It's on that one. I was like, what? Yeah, it was that one. Anyway, man, next Friday, 6 o'clock, we're gonna have an interview with Dr. Wilson, man. Make sure y'all support, man. All right. Ain't nothing free around here. Gotta pay the people to get the interviews for me. Boy, they looking for that too. You can believe that. That's right. That conversation was in 2024, something like that, bro. Yep. Yeah, he died in 2025, but ain't nobody know he was sick though. See, I knew though. But people was talking about him like it was. Next week, next Friday. Next Friday. All right. All right, let's get back on schedule. All right. Let's get it going. Make sure y'all like and share and subscribe, man. We trying to get 5,000 subscribers. Y'all gotta hit the damn like button, man, and keep us in the algorithm, man. Y'all want to keep getting expert material, man. Y'all gotta support, bro. I don't do no plan. I don't do no capping, man. Let's get back to Dr. Keita.
Of technology, societies, early African stuff. It's not a quote unquote regular history book. I like what Chris did here. I don't know how many other people would have done it because it gives you some touchstones to think about things. It talks about a range of things, and he doesn't make any distinction between prehistory and history. In fact, I don't use that word. We talk about early history and later history. It's all history. It's all history.
All right. All right. So we got that. So the point I want to make is it seems that people will use there's the Afrocentric model, and the doctor, him, but it seems to be it's actually associated with a lot of misinformation these days. And so what do you attribute that to?
Well, I think that I don't know all of the claims that you're talking about, but I do know that some people would say from a Black perspective that certain things have been hidden from us. And so the data and the information that they use, which is very suggestive, they take as automatic fact without fully exploring it.
Mm.
So, and some things I think that we have an interest in, or we have, we think that things have been hidden from us in such a way that we have to describe them and claim them once we find out that we might have a connection at any level. So that's how I would, I mean, that's
Right.
how I would tend to think about that.
Okay.
So for example, was Hannibal black? I
You
mean,
know,
I don't know. I
I
don't know,
wouldn't know what he looked like.
but I don't know what that means. I mean,
Right.
the Romans who fought against him did not call him an Ethiopian,
Correct.
and they did describe other people in that part of Africa. The first part of Africa to be called Africa actually is up there north of the northern part of Saharan line at the 32nd parallel, and that what that leaves is Tunis, Tunisia, and the southern top tip of Algeria and Morocco. That was Africa to the Romans. Okay, that was
Right.
Africa. Egypt was Egypt. Ethiopia was the place south of Egypt, and Agisimba was a place in the desert and across the desert. Okay,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
so so, but Africa was that place up there, and Africa may in fact be a Berber word, and I don't know, but that's what some people have suggested.
Suggestive.
Okay,
Absolutely.
yeah. So the thing is this. Uh, so if you went to if you could go back in a time machine and talk to a Roman about Africa, he's not going to know anything about any Zulu. Well, there were no Zulu then anyway. So I'm just trying to say that
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't know that. So when it comes to Hannibal, were there people on those Punic ships and those Phoenician ships that sailed Mediterranean that if we saw them today walking down the street in Baltimore that we would call black? Absolutely. We have DNA evidence to that effect. Now we don't know. Okay, if we did a DNA test on them, we would say that they were infra-Saharan or whatever. Craniofacially, also, we have that type of evidence. I have a colleague who's done work on a place in Spain called Ibiza, which was a Punic colony that they settled. And you have this level of, you have high diversity there. And you have the range of people with craniofacial traits, all sub-Saharan often, all the way to the other end of the spectrum. Okay. In that regard, my point that I'm trying to make simply is that I think that in some cases, in terms of what people call Afrocentric, they are making a claim and probably sometimes deliberately exaggerating to just make a point to get into a room, so to speak, to have a. But give me an example of a
Okay.
like
I
that.
got one for you. I
Okay.
got 2 points.
Okay.
People will say
Claims.
that the ancient Egyptians and their society called themselves black, and the ancient Egyptians traveled to West Africa and
Okay.
populated West Africa.
Okay.
That's definitely a common claim.
Okay. All right. So
2 points.
on the issue about Egyptians calling themselves black, I understand that there's a linguistic argument about that. It has to do with the determinative related to the sign for land, people, and what have you. Uh, is this a legitimate discussion? I don't know. I can't comment on that. I wouldn't see any reason why they would call themselves black because uh, they would have been in a place with a polyglot population just based on evolutionary history. Of course, they wouldn't know anything about that. And early on, if Sheikh Anta Diop is right, there would have been people in their midst who would not have been as black as others, even according to Sheikh Anta Diop.
Right.
So he's calling them black from an ethnic point of view. But although he also makes the claim on the same glyphs that they refer to black people. Again, I don't know enough about that. Now, when it comes to the issue of a migration thesis, Sheikh Anta Diop did have a thesis in one of his books, and I think some others, that there was a migration out of Egypt. I've never been able to, I think there were probably contacts and individuals or maybe small groups, but I see no evidence of a mass depopulation of Egypt at any one particular time. Okay. I don't see the kinds of rules of evidence that I would like to see archaeologically for that. I would
Mm-hmm.
expect to see certain markers and certain things.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about certain hints and influences. I think that either that may have a common cradle, or maybe there was some actual migration and influence. But I don't see, I mean, no matter what anybody says, late stage Egyptian is not the same as Walla. Okay. Now, could they be related? Could they be related languages? Or if you want to talk about an earlier migration from east to west, depending on how far you want to go. You want to go back to that P2 ancestor. You want to go back to
Hold that P2. We're gonna talk about that P2. Hold that. Not yet.
No, but if you want to go back to an earlier period, talk about east to west migration of people within Africa. Yeah, that's much more plausible, in fact, and very likely. You know,
Absolutely.
but that's a different thing than saying Egyptians who were self-conscious of being Egyptians migrated. That's a different thing.
Okay.
Thing. So there may be something in certain ideas, but it may not be exactly the way people are thinking about it, and that may be because they haven't read certain books and what have you. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I'm glad, and we should have our notes and be taking our notes for this conversation, man. Once again, man, you're listening to interviews with experts, community of skeptics, and we appreciate the crowd. And yeah, let's move on to the next slides. Get through this. Very interesting, and then we'll definitely take some questions from the crowd. Okay. Well, again, what are the dangers of oversimplifying African history by claiming all major achievements as African? I think you kind of touched on it a little bit. What are the dangers of that?
When you say major achievements, are you talking about major achievements within Africa? See, even the way you juxtapose the words African history, and are you talking about things within Africa?
So, for instance,
things globally, Africans contributing to the global stage. Which one are you talking about?
We talking about people will literally say, "Car." Africans invented the car.
Okay, all right. Now things like that, you have every right to ask for proof and evidence. You have everything to ask. You have every right to ask for that. Are there some things that Africans invented? The interesting thing is that there's some things that Africans invented that some archaeologists still want to debate about. Did Africans actually independently smelt iron on their own? Okay. Okay.
Thought they did West Africa for sure. No, that's
evidence there. But what I'm trying to say is that there are issues from within African history that for a long time, if you remember the Hamitic hypothesis, Seligman basically said that the civilizations of Africa, any meaningful culture in Africa, they come from the outside. Well, nobody believes that anymore. But for up through the 60s, people would write, you could see hints of that way of thinking. People used to talk about the dynastic race with regards to Egypt. And this is hence where you get the pushback from some African scholars, of course, that but this has not been a part of mainstream, so-called, I'm not going to say mainstream, hasn't been a part of the European Academy too for a long time. The dynastic race hypothesis has long been, has been dropped or is no longer believed. Modern Egyptologists do not accept, and I don't know to what degree all of them ever accepted the dynastic race hypothesis, was the hypothesis that in the later stages of pre-dynastic, that the core ideas of kingship and what have you have been brought from the outside. Again, I would point out that the Egyptian crown, the words for king, all of those symbols are clearly based on Nilotic flora and fauna. I mean, the glyphs, they're all local. Now, the ram did come in from outside and get incorporated into that. But then you see Anubis, who's a different kind of creature, who's local. So anyway, what I would say is that you should be able to support any claim that you make with some reasonable amount of evidence, and and be able to show it genealogically speaking. Should be able to build it up. Okay.
Okay. All right, let's get to the next slide.
Oh, Bobby, I think you got to talk to something wrong with your microphone. She
Is
put
something
up,
wrong with my microphone?
I think she said she put up a thing that you weren't talking to everybody. I don't know if that went through.
Okay. Can you hear me now? I'm good. We clear. I hear you clear. I know
Okay,
it's
yeah, I mean,
Good.
I think she meant everybody. I'm not sure.
You're good, Bobby.
okay. All right, we're all good.
Oh, it's talking about the chat.
Oh, we're talking about the chat. We're in the chat. Oh, okay. I messed with it. All right. So look here. Now this is what I had struggled with early on was African diversity, and I was actually stuck in that racist mindset of the Negro and
Well,
and the races. So let me just hold on, let me get to the question. So we back. Okay, so this should be into that. How does DNA evidence like the P2 marker show the diversity of African populations?
well, I'm gonna maybe reshuffle that question
Yeah, please.
and
Okay.
also address something that I think someone raised in the chat box. Uh, they raised a question about modern Egyptians uh, viewing themselves. It depends on which modern Egyptians you talk to, what they think, and how much they look like the most ancient Egyptians. In a way, it really doesn't matter because they still are carrying some of that DNA to some degree from those earliest days, although some of them very obviously are and know that they are of Turkish ancestry and know that they've been assimilated into the population. And so, this is really a matter of, it's very difficult as one Egyptian woman who I'm going to be working with,
Hmm.
who is working on this whole issue of Egyptians and Africanity and Arabicity and reconciling conflicts between African Americans. So there are people, even Egyptians, who are working on this stuff. The whole notion of indigenous in Egypt gets very difficult for all the obvious reasons, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It gets very, very difficult, except for the obvious recent immigrants or the people who know, well, we're Turks, and there's
Right.
some who do and some who say it, some who don't, and they're Greek Egyptians too. Okay. But anyway, go ahead.
We could just well shoot, since we right there real quick, just a little slight deviation. So and you talked about so it would you consider there like to be was it ever a history or historical evidence to show that that the population in Egypt was displaced? And so you'll hear people say that's another of those claims that those Egyptians, that those modern Egyptians are the replacement population, and that's one of those Afrocentric ideas that well, a lot of people say that and so this is where the rubber meets the road. What is the
Okay, let me answer that for you.
okay? Yeah,
Very
go ahead.
scientifically, very
Scientific. Let's get it.
very easily.
Okay.
The modern Egyptian population, I believe, let's call it a belief, has absorbed a lot of people over a long period of time. Okay. And there are models that you can actually run. Actually, someone developed at my alma mater when before I got there, where you can actually do really basic gene simulations, and you can show how if you have 5% migration, which means 5% of people coming from the outside into a given space and assimilating, okay, and having children there. It doesn't take, and in fact, I published based on something that somebody else said, it doesn't take a whole lot of migration if you do it, say, over 25 generations to fundamentally change the genetics of a population. It doesn't.
Okay.
But now, does the population change its social cultural identity? No, not if people have been totally absorbed. We're not talking about people moving in and keeping to themselves. We're talking about people who come in and get assimilated. And let's think about a situation where in the Islamic period where polygamy gets to be very common, right?
Correct.
So if you have polygamy and you have foreign male lineage coming in, and he has 4 local wives, he's going to produce, all of his sons are going to be carrying that foreign lineage. So you can increase it, not due to natural selection, not due to some evolutionary process, but just simply due to out reproducing everybody else.
Hmm.
Okay. So when you make a claim that the Egyptians there today, if you want to say this, that the Egyptians today are not the same as the Badarians, I'm willing to stand up and say that. Okay.
Me too.
That's an easy statement to make. But it doesn't mean that the Egyptians of today, when I say not the same, doesn't mean that they're not related to the Badarians. Any more than an Afro-American who can pass for white doesn't mean that he's not related to some Africans. It just means he has less African ancestry. So it really depends on how you want to pin your perspective.
How you want to fight that fight?
Well, it's not a fight. It's not a fight. It's not a fight. I mean, in my
it's a fight.
Well, okay, all right. Well,
yeah.
no, I don't believe
emphatically. I'll tell you what they say emphatically that the populations in the Nile Valley now is wouldn't be part of those ancient Egyptians or not those people at all. That those Egyptians have went to Kenya, South Africa, and that's what they take their totems with you. I've heard all of it.
Okay. Now let me ask a question about this.
Ask that question. Go ahead.
You have to ask a question. If anybody says that in that way, you have to ask them, well, why aren't they speaking Egyptian?
Where they at? Where they went to?
Yeah, why aren't they speaking Egyptian? Now, which raises another question too about linguistics, right?
Right.
So it raises a question about, is it possible that ancient Egyptian and other African languages not deemed to be a part of the family that traditionally or by most academics is not part of the same family, but could they be? Yeah, that's possible. I mean, could there be a Paleo-African family? I think Professor Obanga postulates that. He says, yeah, they could be related. Even Greenberg, did you know that? Even Greenberg said there's possibility of what he calls Afro-Asiatic, and Niger Congo could be related. Did you know that he said that?
Yes, I've actually heard that. Actually heard that.
Greenberg said that. A lot of people interested in the subject don't think that he said that or don't know that he said that. However, nobody actually took up the actual study to systematically look at that from my point of view.
Okay.
Although we have some writers, some people working on these topics who feel that they have uncovered relationships with, say, ancient Egyptian and Bantu and whatever. I cheer this work on because I think that they may uncover something, but we may need new language. We may need to think about it. I mean, it's like this. Do you think about populations and evolution simply as things splitting over time? What about if things split, come back together, resplit, and then remix? I mean, in other words, what about sort of more of a spider web than a simple tree that's dividing and dividing? You see what I'm saying? So there may be ways to think about linguistics. The two young sisters, Nikaya and Calcea,
correct,
Jackson and Johnson, who found the trigonometric proof for the Pythagorean theorem, and this was said to be impossible. Two young Black girls working 3-4 hours a night, teenagers. They found a proof that was not circular. It was said that this could not be done, and they did it. The fact that they did that should be a lesson to each and every one of us. That we look at the people amongst us who are creative, who are thinking about doing things different ways. We should cheer them on. It doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily be right. It doesn't necessarily mean, but we can cheer them if they've got good information and they're working solidly. Those two girls were working solidly using certain mathematical techniques, but they used them in a way that they had not been used. So that makes them geniuses, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, they absolutely are. But you said some key things, and I don't want to brush over this point here. Are you basically saying that those that try to make those relationships with Bantu, that they're basically speculating, and you're cheering that on, right? Because
no,
possibility.
No. You're making a value judgment. I'm not doing that. I'm saying that.
What do you think? Yeah, I'm saying they speculate.
I'm saying if you work, well, no, what I'm saying, that's like a final judgment. I'm saying that if you work systematically on languages and so forth, and you feel that you're uncovering relationships and your methods are sound, even if you create a new method, so to speak, because I've heard some interesting papers in the last 2 weeks, in fact, at a conference I attended. Then the question becomes, if people are trained and they're working in a particular way and they're finding things that they feel are correspondences or they certain types of data, the question becomes is whether or not what they're doing fits into the standard paradigm or the standard may not be the point. It may be that what they're doing is going to break that, but that they're still thinking in terms of classification in a narrow sense and how they're going to do this. And they're still wanting or they're still doing things in a particular way. Whereas, in fact, what they may be doing and their results may actually overturn that way of thinking. But you have to be able to see it, just like those two girls, you know, they overturned something totally.
Hold on.
And I'm willing, and what I'm saying is that I'm not going to tell anybody that the work that they're working on, if their work is solid, if they feel that they're seeing things, it may take them a long time to get an audience, but they are likely, they may be finding things, finding things that speak either to a deeper time level or that have picked up something in a very narrow way. I don't know. I'm not a historical linguist. You know, I'm not an archaeologist either, but you know, people find stuff all the time that so is not supposed to be here, you know, stuff like that, or how can this be, you know, things like that. So, and these two girls, oh my gosh, I think about them almost every other day. I talk about to somebody about them because
you sure do. I hear you all the time.
What they did, yeah. And so the question is, will we take what they did and use it? We oftentimes during Afro-American History Month, we valorize individual greats who've done particular things. And usually they've done those things in the context of institutions or businesses outside of the Black community. But they made great discoveries. How they feed back into the Black community or the Afro-American community or the world is usually based on what that company does with what they do. You know, it's general. So the question now becomes, is this an opportunity based on what those young ladies did to look at what they did and come up with, say, for example, a new computer language? I don't know.
Correct.
But my point is that we're right here at the beginning of when they did it. So we don't have to look back and say, oh, you know, Granville Woods invented this or so-and-so invented the traffic light, you know, and Garrett Morgan invented the traffic light. And oh, we didn't make any money from it because we didn't have a company to put. No, these girls just did this thing. And the question is, will we seize on it? Will our academics get together and look at these things and figure out a way to use it? And I don't know.
So, okay, and I want to make sure I'm getting what you're saying. You talked about training, you talked about kind of moving in silence a little bit. But what I want to say is there are people that will have these ideas and talk about those ideas as if it has been verified, as if that is exactly what it is. That's more or less my pushback.
I can't.
That's my pushback on those.
Okay, I can't speak to that.
Correct. Okay.
I can't speak to that, and you know, and I'm going to be straight. I still work within the context of when I do think about these things of Greenberg's classification, with knowing full well that there was pushback against it in the 60s, which a lot of people don't seem to know, by Europeans who didn't think, you know, you can make the decision that the only real languages are the individual languages that you see in front of you. So in other words, you don't make any big classification. You just look at individual languages and don't talk about what's related to what. You can do that too. You can do linguistics that way too. Okay, but I do know that, like I said, that even Greenberg said that there was some evidence or that there might be a hint that Niger Congo and his family and Afro-Asiatic might be related or could be related.
Okay.
You know, some evidence that this is the case. You know, he said this, but he never developed it. But I could read the passage to you from the book. It's right behind me right now. You know,
you want to read that?
No, I don't. You don't want me to read it, do you? No.
Nah. Let me get to the next question. But I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the flavor of our conversations.
Yeah. A lot of times, yeah, I haven't been in contact with that many people who make absolute claims like that. I do know some people who very strongly believe that Afro-Asiatic is not a legitimate family.
Yeah.
I know Professor Obanga.
Yeah.
Now, what Obanga says is different than what some of the other people are saying, because there's some people that say what he says, but they don't work the way he works. So, I mean, so that's another issue. So in other words, everybody that's denouncing Greenberg is not working in the same way that Greenberg worked. Okay. I mean, I'm sorry, is not working in the same way with each other. So you got a lot of different people saying different stuff. And like I said, I suspect that those who have found consistencies and patterns in what they're doing, I suspect that they have uncovered something, or possibly have uncovered something that hasn't been described yet. So the issue is, and this is a philosophical issue, will the new language needed to describe what they've done come into being? Okay, but go ahead.
Okay. All right. Why is it important to highlight the wide range of looks and genetics within Africa when discussing the ancient Egyptians? We
I think we covered that already.
kind of covered it a little bit.
Light skin genes emerged in Africa a long time ago. Sarah Tishkoff showed that there's a range of variation in indigenous Africans to the degree that there were any back migrations 20,000 years ago. You pick whatever date you want. Those people have largely been absorbed into the African world, and their bodies, I mean, their whole beings have been shaped by an African environment, making them as populations a part of the African world. It reflects in African history. Things like the R1B, V88, R1B is said to come 20,000 years back to Africa. Okay. Well, if it's been in Africa 20,000 years and it's been shuffled around, you can find people from all of the language families, groups, whatever you want to call them, who are carrying this gene, which to me means it got into the Sahara and wet Sahara and got shuffled around. Okay. It doesn't mark any singular, even though there have been papers that suggest it marked the spread of chatting. I don't accept that. I don't think that the evidence for that is good. And there's some people that say they didn't even come back as early as other people as initially claimed. So there's disagreement. And if you're gonna read this stuff, you have to read all of it and take notes. Get you a little note card, however you want to do it.
Okay.
And systematically go through and learning how to ask the questions that you want to ask. A lot of times, we're sharp. I mean, we've grown up in the United States. We know when people are wolfing, and we know when we have an instinct about well, is this quite right? And now sometimes for certain academic things, if you don't learn the lingo or enough of the lingo, you may not be aware of the pathways that things can go down, paths that things can go through. But you can still learn how to read the literature, read the conclusions, and you can write the authors. They'll usually write you back if you say, I'm a student. I'm a student and I'm curious about this. Can you explain this to me? Now,
that's my
sometimes
thing.
the old paradigms still persist. And I could sit right here right now and tell you about some papers that were written where, from my point of view, some of the old ways of thinking have persisted through it. But I'm not going to get into that. I don't want to get into
no. Let's get to the next question.
Okay.
All right. The next question was kind of when we talked about there's no one way to be African. I think, and on that video you talked about it, and you was having that discourse. That was a very, very to a lot of people, it was shocking because we could have swore if a person looked this way, they would have to be European. And you talked about the variation of the way you looked, and yeah, that was a man. Look, that was the point. Okay. So now, language migration. Make this turn slide. Okay. Talk to us about the issue of language classification.
We just did that.
Did that, so we don't
some
have
people don't believe that Afro-Asiatic is a real linguistic phylum. Other people do. For the kind of stuff that I do, it doesn't make any difference. But I do keep company with actually different people who have different ideas about it, but who basically say it. Uh, you could you could you could argue the value of if you believe that the reconstructions are accurate, sometimes you can reconstruct cultural vocabulary and ideas and beliefs back in the languages. Some of Chris Arrett's students have done some very interesting work on the interlacustrine areas of Africa near Rwanda and those places, using historical linguistics and archaeology, be able to construct a historical narrative where, and that's the evidence. Uh, not all places have written records. Written records aren't always accurate. Like Collingwood said, a piece of pottery can be a historical document. So, but the whole issue is that you have to learn the methods involved. So if you're interested in histories, oral histories, you go to Mississippi. You go to Mississippi and talk to and ask Black folks what happened to them and what have you. And you interview 100 people who are over 80 years old, and you put all that together, you're going to get a different story than what you get out of the newspapers from Mississippi, right? So,
All right, let's get to the next slide.
Okay. And that's a micro example.
All right, man, let's stop right here, man. Take a little break, man. Let me give you an update. That interview is today at 6:00 with Dr. Wilson. So join us on the interviews with the experts. Of course, it's hosted by me. Debunking the funk on vaccines. Misinformation, man. Catch that interview right here, man. Make sure you support the effort to bring the community's experts. See, when I bring these experts that look like you, does that change your opinion on it? I don't think so. I think you just wanted to have an opinion anyway, whether the opinion was based in ignorance or not. And you use the excuse of saying that's the white man's science as a reason for you not to accept it. But we bring experts to come in all colors and creeds because it's the information and not the color of a person's skin that matters, at least to me. I can't speak for everybody else. Some of y'all think if your color of the skin is extra dark with the extra melanin from the sun, then some kind of way that information has to be right. Yeah, I don't take that side of it. I think that to be ridiculous. I think it can trick you. I think you can be tricked by skin color into thinking that, okay. So, man, please make sure y'all tune in. Immortal, man, what's up, man? I want you to tune in, man, and listen to the expert, bro. You know I got your back. I ain't gonna never fake you out, man. I'm gonna make sure you get the best information. I appreciate your work, man, your tireless work and what you do, your note-taking, and you know, I always appreciate the young brothers, man. I'm not gonna never steer you wrong. You ain't gotta worry about that. It might not be familiar to you, the things I say. It might not sound right, because we don't have sound right reasoning. We have information that may be counterintuitive because science is counterintuitive. We don't play the sound. If it sound right, it must be right. You know how they say it, sound right. No, we don't got all that. Nope. Yep. So make sure y'all today at 6:00, man. Important interview, man. It is, man. Hit the Cash App to show support. Ain't nothing free around here. Everything costs something. All right, show some love, man. Let me call out and man, and join in hitting that super chat too. That's important to help the channel grow, man. It is. And I appreciate the Cash App so far. I'd like to call out a couple of them. All right, call out a couple of them real quick. DeVille, man, appreciate you, man. Appreciate that love right there. All right, Kevin Johnson, man, we appreciate the Cash App. Flam Flam, funny guy. Appreciate the Cash App, man, and Ghost, man. Appreciate that love, man. All right, hit the Cash App, show some love, man. Show support, man. All right. Somebody say if it don't sound right, it's a sound bite. Huh? I don't know what that. Yeah, you overthought that. Kind of missed that. Huh? Yeah. All right, so let's keep the interview going, man. Show some love. Hit that cash app, man, and hit that super chat. We got few super chats. We ain't reached out. We try to get 10 super chats, but it is what it is, man. Y'all listening to interviews with the experts, man, with sa.neter Keita. Very, very intelligent brother, educated, has a doctorate and a PhD. Biodiversity, important conversation, man. It's important for y'all to hear the experts. You know, this community is raised on non-experts. And it's just, you know, I think it's just important for us to get the experts, yo. At least in my mind. You know, I could be wrong. Maybe y'all just like hearing anybody. No, I didn't get that, brother. Not at all. Didn't get it. Sorry, man. All right, let's keep it going. Interviews with the experts. Okay, can language studies help us trace the early development?
Okay, when you talk about
Egyptian
early
civilization?
development, I think I touched on that in the following manner. Irrespective of how you classify ancient Egyptian, the fact is that there are certain things that were borrowed into early Egyptian society that came from outside of Africa. Domesticated goats, sheep, wheat, and barley. And now the evidence seems to say cattle as well. They came from outside of Africa. Okay. So they came from outside of Africa at that early moment in time into societies that were not doing certain things, then the question becomes is why aren't the words for these foreign items foreign words? And the answer is because the Egyptians, the proto-Egyptians, people in the Nile Valley, were experimenting. And they had names for these things that came and or for some of the circumstances. So they could use their own names. They just transferred. There's a name for that in linguistics, which I'm forgetting, but they just transferred the name that they had to the new thing, you know, and they adopted these new things on their own terms as they needed them, as they used them. And then they created a society that lasted 3,000 years. For me, the marvelous thing about ancient Egypt is that Saharan pastoralists merged with hunter foragers on the Nile and some sort of symbiosis and interplay, and they produced an ideology and a formula for a society that lasted 3,000 years. And no matter how you cut it, that's phenomenal.
It's a long time.
That's phenomenal. And they could return to that formula. They're kind of a constitution, if you will, even though I don't want to use that word because it's been abused here recently. They did. And that's phenomenal. Let me ask you, have you ever heard it said that the Latin alphabet is African in origin? Have you heard people say that? The Latin alphabet, huh?
I've not heard that.
So,
well, I heard
that's interesting. That's interesting.
I heard the Greek writing. I heard people say like linear B and linear A and things of that nature was connected to the Egyptian writing. I heard.
All right. Well, no, that's in the same line, but that's actually true. That's true. But it's by way of the Phoenicians.
Correct.
It's by way of the Phoenicians. So so if somebody makes the claim that Latin writing ultimately owes its origin, its great granddaddy is African, meaning ancient Egyptian, that's a true statement. But it does sound like it's in the same family as some of those other fantastic statements. It depends on how it's said and whether people can back up. Can people show the lineage? Can they present it? And that's what you need to be able to do. You need to be able to walk through it.
Right.
That's all.
And I appreciate that. And you know, I really appreciate our conversations. And it shows me where, you know, with my strengths and my weaknesses, and we all need that. Let's go to the next slide. Science and public education. How can bioanthropology help the public better understand African history? This is a big one for me. All right, I always talk about
well,
trying to really,
when you say
acclimate that.
okay, when you say better understand African history, that's tricky because, uh, strictly speaking, uh, uh, anthropology and history are two different things. Although some people have said they should be connected and work together.
Mhm.
Bioanthropology specifically may help you understand something about the deep origins of people, but that doesn't matter in terms of them as historical actors. Okay,
Mhm.
so for
Mhm.
example, Songhai, the Songhai Empire, a kingdom in West Africa.
Okay.
Songhai, according to Greenberg, is related to Nilos. It's a Nilo-Saharan language. Okay,
Mhm.
so probably during the Green Sahara, if you accept this thesis, people migrated over and they wound up on the Niger River. It's
Mhm.
not that many Songhai, as compared to others. But Songhai is not in the same family as Mande. It's not the same thing. Although by this moment in time, there's been so much borrowing back and forth that you have to be able to discern that. Again,
Mhm.
according to the standard practice. Now, if you dig into the graves of Central Mali, uh, and you uncover certain types of DNA, that doesn't tell you anything about the history. So we can ask the following question: when should genetics lead the narrative? My answer is usually never.
Huh.
Usually never. So let me continue that. And I wrote a piece about this with some other people on the history of the Fulani. You can look that up, published 2009
Okay.
and 2010,
Mhm.
because there was a Sudanese genetics group. Now, and it gets funny about history because a lot of people think that for African history, that it's all about migration. That African history is just migration. I mean, especially for the places where there are not any written records, that it's about migration. They don't think about the development of technology, transformations in the society over time, or what was going on at this moment in time and next moment in time for the whole society. They're thinking in terms of migration. It's a very interesting thing. I got into I'm not gonna say a fist fight, but pretty close with a geneticist
Yeah.
who said something. But anyway, because they basically are saying, well, these people don't have a history, and the only history you can come up with is through genetics or something like that,
Mhm.
meaning a migration story, meaning that their history is a history of how their fundamental human ancestry got assembled. Other people's history is about how they created new technology or whatever. Can you hear me? Okay, so now bioanthropology, let me tell you how it can help. Let's use the example of any place where you got well-preserved skeletons. What you can do is tell something about the health and nutrition of those societies, okay? Based on their skeletal remains, based on their dentition, based on other observations, you might be able to say something about diseases that affected them, as well as demography, how long they lived, what the infant mortality, the longevity, and the ratio of infants to others was in terms of deaths, early deaths versus later deaths. So bioanthropology, in terms of skeletal biology, can offer some information in that regard. Genetics might be able to offer you some other information in terms of if you think there were migrations and what have you. But usually, whatever other framework has been developed based on uh, what ever other records, archaeology or written records or what have you, the genetic data should be interpreted or placed in the context of the pre-existing narrative. Genetics very rarely can lead the narrative. Like I was saying before, in terms of a migration story, there was a study that was done on Fulani in Sudan, and there was a very high frequency of the ARA haplotype, R1b, V88, or R1b, maybe without the B88. And so, based on that frequency in that particular group of Fulani, the guy said, "Oh well, this may indicate the Fulani came from the Near East." Now that sounds very Seligmanish, And some Fulani want to say that, but under Islamic influence, I would say. But I wrote a rebuttal to that piece with some others pointing out that all of the known historical works and all linguistic works point to the Fulani moving from west to east. So then, and their cradle, even in their own stories, their cradle is in the west. Okay, in terms of their because the different types of Fulani as well too. So the question becomes, well, then how did they get that huge number, that high percentage of this quote unquote Eurasian male lineage? Well, it's not so hard to understand in my view. The Fulani have migrated across all the way from the Senegal Valley, all the way to Djibouti, all the way across the Sahel Belt in Africa. And they were pastoralists, those particular Fulani. We're not talking about the Fulani who settled in the towns and became Islamic scholars, although some of those pastoral Fulani did too. So what do pastoralists do when conditions get bad? If they lose their herd, they may have to combine with other groups of people, right?
Correct.
If you can see that. So if you start assimilating other groups of people because you've lost your herd and you're still going to be a pastoralist, you pick up not simply other people, but over time you pick up other genes and other ancestries.
Of course.
Okay? So you have to, so the question becomes, like I said, when should genetics lead the narrative? I say almost never. That genetics should be used as an adjunct or understood or inserted into or seen in conjunction with frameworks that have already been established based on other types of data. Okay? So I know that there's a sequence called Ghana, Mali, and Songhai in the West Sahel Belt. I know that there's a sequence in Nubia from Merowe through Christian kingdoms. I know that. Since I have that framework, if you come and get me DNA and it shows me some DNA that you think came from Greeks, I say, well, what time period is it? So I'm using the history narrative that we already have, the framework, and I'm interpreting the DNA in those terms. I'm not letting the DNA dictate, oh, we got this Greek, oh, so they must have been Greeks. No. And same with the Schunemann piece. When you look at the basic data on the Schunemann piece and look at all those mitochondrial lineages, because they only had 3 males and they only did a full sequence on one. But you look at all of those things over from, I think, the 13th dynasty or 12th dynasty, all the way through to the modern period, you see such a diversity of female haplogroups that you almost have to understand that these women are coming even from different places in the Near East. It's not one population movement. Okay, it's spread out. And anyway, I already talked about their efforts to project that back to 20,000 to talk about that as founding, and it doesn't work.
Okay. All right, we come up with the last slide, right? We want to take a little break and then take some questions for the audience. And man, we really appreciate this high level conversation. All right. What can scholars do to fight misinformation? All right, man. So y'all know that's gonna be the last slide right there, man. Make sure y'all hit the Cash App, man. We having this interview today. All right. Let me put up on the screen, man. I hope y'all be there with Dr. Wilson, man. 6 o'clock. All right. So in case y'all didn't know, man, in case y'all not following me on the Community Skeptics, y'all just following me on sa.neter Studios. That's part of what I do in the conversation. I don't just argue back and forth with pseudos. I also interview experts and have great discourse back and forth so we can get these issues cleared up for our community and not always relying on guesswork. We need people that have gone to school, been trained in said subjects to give us clarity. I mean, it's cool. It's cool to listen to people who don't have no degree, right? If they working off of expertise and using experts, it's cool. But a lot of times we have people just saying anything out their mouth, not reading a lick of the literature and talking to our community and playing expert. We don't do that around here. All right, we get a lot of pushback for wanting accuracy and our answers and our questions. So Dr. Wilson will be on. We debunking the funk on misinformation dealing with vaccines. Simple as that. Simple as that, man. So I bring qualified people, man. Love for my community, man. Make sure you hit the Cash App, show some love, man. That's how we do it. All right. Ain't nothing free around here. I know y'all think it is, but it's not. It's not. It's not. Hit the super chats, right? And just show some love, man. Appreciate all the support, man. Like and subscribe. We're trying to get up to 5,000 subscribers on the Community Skeptics. I think we have over 100,000 on sa.neter Studios. So make sure y'all keep us in the algorithm, right? If you appreciate these conversations, man, let me know. And all right, let's continue. Let's get back. Let me go back a little bit here and let's keep going. Come up with the last slide, right? If we want to take a little break and then take some questions for the audience. And man, we really appreciate this high level conversation. All right. What can scholars do to fight misinformation about Africa's past? What can we do? I feel like we need to look our past through anthropology.
Well,
We need to be in these fields. That's how I feel. We need to get in these fields.
well,
Like
you answered it. We need to get in the fields, and we need to have training in institutions where there is a critical, where critical analysis is being done, and where you know that people are not being Eurocentric. That's the best way to do it. That is how you help, and where you have to be open to different techniques and different lines of evidence. So that's it in a nutshell. So critical departments that are open to various methods that actually have been going on for quite some time. In fact, but the critical part is critical because you have to. The critical part is critical because you have to beware of the persistence of older ideas and paradigms. So you know about what means what. So you have to have a critical perspective, an open mind, and go to a place where you can get broad training. Now, when you talk about misinformation about Africa's past, the question is, what kind of misinformation are you talking about? Can you give me an example, or of what might be by category? What might be information?
that the Africans were circumnavigated the globe and populated the Americas by
Okay,
ship.
so,
First,
well, you're talking about. Well, okay, I thought you were talking about. See, I tend to think about misinformation from within Africa. So the question of,
okay.
where I mean, where was iron smelted first in Africa? See, that's the thing. When you talk about misinformation to me, that's what I'm thinking about. Or did Africans actually smelt iron, or was it that the technique of iron working, did it come from the outside? Or if not from the outside of Africa, at least it didn't come from tropical Africa. This is where you get into the sub-Saharan versus, say, Carthaginian origins of things. You know, I mean, you had people that would say stuff like that. Well, we now have old iron furnaces, 2,000 years, 2,000 plus years old, 3,000 years old, from the Cameroon grasslands. You know, we have iron smelting inland from Tanzania. So people, I don't know if there were multiple inventions or if there are people going around spreading ideas. We have iron, of course, in Merowe and Kush, late Merowe, late in the same place where the Kush kingdom was. Iron was not smelted in Egypt for a very long time, you know. So, which actually may be another type of problem for thesis that argues that people just streamed out of Egypt. Then why didn't they make bronze all over the place? You could raise a lot of other questions. But the thing is that a critical approach, multiple disciplines, okay, and a broad notion of what constitutes history. Okay.
Okay, so let's take a little break, and so you might want to get your water. Y'all might want to get some water in the bathroom, get a couple questions, and we're gonna wrap this up. So yeah, we're listening to Dr. Keita in a high level conversation, and I would like to say this. Big up to conscious ingenuity. Okay. This plays a vital role in the community and she sponsors all our shows. Big supporter, professor, and big up to Dr. Oya Maya. All right, let's take that break, y'all. All right, y'all go get y'all water and take a break. Doc, take a break, and we can come back and finish it off with some questions from the audience,
Okay.
man. I appreciate you.
Get yourself
something to eat.
All right, go ahead. You gotta have Juju go first.
Where did you ask the question?
Okay, so my questions are really simple. Um, two concepts that I've only heard you say in a very particular manner, and that is how you don't use sub-Saharan Africa. You use intra, supra, and this notion of polytopicity. Because I'm always hearing people, oh, they got it from us. We did that, blah, blah, blah. So I wanted you to explain those two concepts very briefly.
Okay. So yeah, briefly, because there's a particular kind of cultural baggage and perspective when the term sub-Saharan or North African is used, and I've written about this. You can find it in something I wrote in the Journal of Ancient Egyptian Interconnection. So I said, if we're going to do geography, then let's do it appropriately. So I talk about infra-Saharan, Saharan, and super-Saharan. And so what that allows me to do is to stay strictly geographical. And then you can talk about the Western quadrant, Eastern quadrant of Africa, Northwest quadrant, Northeast quadrant, and so forth. It actually changes a lot of things about the way we think about things. Once you change that language, it forces you. Number one, you got to go to the map and say, well, wait a minute, where does the Sahara begin and end? So it up north, it begins at like 32-degree parallel, somewhere 32, 30 degrees, pick your choice. And so above that part of Africa is only, I mean, what you have north of that is only is basically Tunisia, that part of Africa that sticks out and touches that's close to Spain. You see what I mean?
I do.
And so
I agree.
that can be useful. The other way though that I've talked about before is to talk about supratropical Africa and infratropical Africa. So the two tropic lines, the tropic line is about 23.4 degrees latitude north of the equator and 24 degrees south. So tropical Africa actually begins in southern Egypt. Okay. So, and it includes a lot of the Sahara and parts of the Saharan states. Goes all the way down below the equator. Now above, but supertropical would include northern Egypt or most of Egypt and the Saharan regions of all of the Maghreb states. So the Saharan regions of Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Libya. So once again, it would force you to think differently about it. And your other question was about polytopicity. Polytopicity is a term from the zoological literature in terms classificatory literature that simply describes populations that are widely dispersed but are almost indistinguishable phenotypically. So an easy way to think about that in terms of animals is you got some snails in Georgia and some snails in India whose shells are identical, but you know they can't be related. So the question is, do you lump them together because you're grouping things by similarity, or do you try to smash them up, get their DNA, and classify them genealogically, phylogenetically? See the difference?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do. I understand. I understand how you use it culturally also, though.
Well,
Like
which one culturally?
polytopicity.
Well, I don't use it culturally that much. So remind me of where you think. Now, in terms of human beings, polytopicity, in terms of phenotype, would be like the so-called oceanic Negroids at one time when that language was used, and certain tropical Africans, so who were also called Negroids. They looked similar, but even a long time ago, they realized that they weren't closely related in a recent historical sense. Now, can you give me an example of where I've talked about polytopicity in terms of culture?
I thought I heard you speak, maybe I'm wrong, I thought I heard you speak on it in a sense of cultural, like when people are trying to superimpose their culture on other people, and taking it for their own. Like their culture, other people's culture, and taking those other people's culture as their own, you know?
Well, no, if I use the word polytopicity for that would be appropriation. No, that would not be a proper use zoologically of polytopicity.
Okay, so it's only a zoological
Yeah,
term.
it's only a taxonomic. It's a term that comes from taxonomy. Now, I guess you could have two cultures that resemble each other greatly, far displaced. So then the question becomes, because polytopicity comes up as a descriptive term, but also it came up as a problem in terms of the subspecies in zoology, or the issue of racial classifications for animals, where you have far-flung things that look very similar morphologically, but that was a problem if you'd already classified animals based on a description. But then you find this thing 2,000 miles away, and you say, wait a minute, could they really be related?
Okay.
Thank
We're
you
gonna
for the
go to-
question.
Thank you. We're gonna go to one of the questions in the Q&A portal.
Get Joe. Or you want to go to
And
the
he's
portal
already,
real
yeah,
quick?
he has a question in there. We have 6 questions in there, actually. And
Over
then
Joe?
Kyle.
Come over, Joe.
No, we have multiple people who ask questions.
Yeah, get Joel up there first, though.
Okay. From Joel Armstrong.
Yeah, get him. No, let him ask it.
Does he want to?
Yeah, you want to ask it. That's
Okay.
Joel.
Okay.
We always did the big
In the
donut.
meantime, Kyle, go ahead and ask your question.
Y'all can't come on the panel, I think, Bobby. That's why he put it there.
Yeah, he put the questions in.
Oh, well,
All right, so let me go ahead and ask the question from Joel. So Joel asks, ancient Egypt had a complex genetic history influenced by interactions with both sub-Saharan Africa and the Near East. What is the most accurate way to describe the first dynasties? Can we say they are Black because they came from the South? How do you define who is Black?
I don't use the word Black usually, number one. Number two, I talk about populations that are biogeographical or biohistorical Africans. And I acknowledge a range of variation in Egypt. I don't know what color the first dynasties were. And depending on, what or how you want to say that, I will say that the early populations of Egypt, as I said earlier, if you do an analysis on skeletons, because we don't have ancient DNA, you find that they show affinities with people in the South. That doesn't necessarily mean that they look identical to them, but it does mean that they had affinities to them. So the world is not simply divided into sub-Saharan Africa and Europe, or there's an indigenous, think in terms of an indigenous Saharan populations, or indigenous more northern populations that are equally African but different. That's the best way to answer that, and the best way to think of it.
Thank you. I'm going to just do one more since you answered that really quickly from another
That was
person.
a good question, too. That was a good answer. Man.
And then
Ooh.
we're going to get Kyle. So this is from Malcolm Robinson. His question is, you mentioned Sarah Tiskoff and the light-skinned gene. Could you expand on that gene and what it means about the phenotype of the Africans? From Malcolm.
Okay, I don't have that information in terms of sequences in my head, but the discovery itself means one very important thing, namely that indigenous Africans have been variable with regard to that trait, namely skin color, out of which so much has been made historically, socially, and what have you. So the real important value is to say that indigenous Africans could be on an evolutionary basis, have a range of colors, and not all be simply jet black. Although, and no one can give you percentage on that because we don't have ancient DNA to do it. We do know that dark skin survived leaving Africa because of the Cheddar Man. You've heard of the Cheddar Man. Look it up, Cheddar Man in England, of all places. Blue eyes, but very dark skin enough to be lynched in Alabama. Okay. If that's criteria, if it's a social criteria, because there's no scientific criteria where you want to draw the line. How dark does it have to be before you qualitatively call it black? How quantitatively dark does it have to be before you qualitatively change how you describe it? And doesn't that change? And since we're talking about that, I want to show you something that I know that everybody has seen before. These are two twin sisters.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's my favorite. Yeah, that whole magazine, that whole issue right there, very serious work. Yep, we see it.
Yeah, just to illustrate some conceptual things. Now, that doesn't alter the reality of colorism, no matter whether you find it here, the modern Islamic world, Europe, or racism, no matter where you find it. It doesn't alter that. But what it does tell us about how much of this stuff is just all made up, okay? And just based on mythology in terms of how people have used it against people. The skin colors are real, but what they mean is socially determined and socially constructed.
Okay, Kyle, you have your question ready?
I do. Thank you. And thank you again for even coming to speak to us, Dr. Keita.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. So in this little section of the internet community, I think we're pretty much all novice, but we all have a deep love and passion for African history. That's my precursor to my question is, what would be your process for kind of like reconciling or converging like genetic and archaeological evidence to construct like a comprehensive history or narrative or model of populations? I know a lot of us, we get into genetics and haplogroups and all that stuff, but how do you combine all this stuff to get a fair representation?
Well, when you talk about a representation, you'd have to talk about what kind of history and when are you. But let me just say this. Like I said before, the question becomes, when should genetics lead the narrative? And my answer is almost never. So in other words, if you have a historical framework based on archaeology or even linguistics or even written documents, that gives you your framework for your narrative. And then you can look at genetic data to add another dimension to the narrative that exists. It's not very often that you're going to have, unless you're doing straight evolution, a historical narrative that's other than biological history. For example, the P2 transition, which you've heard about, the E1b haplogroup, gave rise to two other haplogroups that account for most of the variation in Africa today. But no one can tell you what the first P2 people spoke, because that was 40,000 years ago, 35,000 years ago. No one can tell you what their first son spoke on either sides of the family tree. It's a long time ago. Now, when you look at the way those things map today, you will see patterns of overlap, but and maybe even the spread. But those genes are older than the populations and older than the language families that are being spoken. That's an important thing to keep in mind. And so when you talk about synthesizing it and using it, that's actually a very good question. And what I will say is that it's context dependent. What do you hope to get from the archaeology and or the genetics? And you have to have a very critical mind. When you say, how do you put it together? I say the archaeology or the historical or written records or whatever else you may have in that regard, that comes first for framework. Genetics comes second, and the genetics will only likely help you, depending on what you're looking at, with some vague notion of the population's most distant origins or ancestors, most distant ancestors. It may not tell you anything about the people right then and there in terms of where they came from, because you don't know, you can't necessarily say when and where at the same time. You know, something that originated 30,000 years ago, if you've got, you know, what's called the underived marker, the para group, that thing is old, and you don't know how, when, and where it got shuffled around. But it might be useful if you have a whole bunch of them, in the sense that, if you find this in one community in one place and you find it in another community and you have reason to believe that they're connected, that might be a clue. And in the rare case, the genetics by themselves might lead you to ask, oh, do we have other kinds of data that will show that there's a connection? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely appreciate that. It was a great answer.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Have a good day. You sound young.
I wish I was.
Oh man.
Well, you should go back to school. But listen, methods in historiography. See, a lot of people learn how to write history, and I'm not criticizing, but oftentimes historiography, the methods of history, historical thinking, the philosophy of history is not taught. And most certainly, you don't necessarily have a lot of books that have applied those methods. I mean, or the philosophy of history, the whole issue of methods, and what constitutes certain things to aspects of African history, because a lot of those methods are based on quote unquote written records. But I will recommend this book to you because it's part of my job. Okay, this is the great Bethwell Ogat, Kenyan historian, just died. He's about 100 years old. These are great essays. This book is hard to find, but if you start talking, I mean, you have an organization, you might get the press. This was published by a Kenyan press. You might get them to reissue some more copies.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
It's very important.
So,
History is destiny. History is knowledge. That's one. I'm gonna show you an old book, but this is another book, Daniel McCall's book. A discussion of historical methods, reconstruction from unwritten story sources. I don't like the word reconstruction. There's no such thing as reconstructing history. What there is gathering data to construct a narrative based on the best evidence that you have. Okay? And that's what Chris Arrett did, who wrote the very first book on so-called stateless people. Well, I mean, on the Southern Nilotes, a lot of the pastoralists, like my wife's people, the Kipsigis, the Nandi, etc., the Southern Nilotes. Now, he's using an old term that we probably wouldn't use as much anymore because it's left over from an earlier era with bad content. But anyway, it's okay. But this is Chris's, I think this was his doctoral dissertation, but this book is still available. Sometimes you can get it for cheap, like $5. But it's worth looking into. But you got to put all this stuff together if you're trying to do the grand narrative. And everybody knows, and I'm not plugging him, but his approaches were different. And then there are other books for topics. So if you're trying to go back to the earlier days and lay down a layer of history, you get your speech communities. You get a Mande or Mandinka speech community long before you get the Mali Kingdom. Okay? The Mali Kingdom comes after there's a speech community, after the things have layered out, so to speak. I guess that kind of gets back to something you asked on, but I'll take the next question because I don't want to,
Okay. Yeah, there's a few more questions. I don't think anyone else come on the stage, but before Brother Reggie goes, there's a few more questions that are in the chat box thingy.
Yeah, just keep going. Just keep going.
I want to honor that as well. So I'm going to get two from there, and then we'll get back up to the stage. So from Fontaine Foster, in reference to the D and E haplogroups, are those still considered African, even though you stated they are closer related to the Asiatic people, if I heard correctly?
I'm sorry, the question was about the DE?
Yeah, D and E haplogroups.
Okay, D and E are derived from the YAP. The YAP insert, we don't need to get into details. The YAP marker is ancestral to both the D and the E haplogroups. Okay, the YAP marker arose in Africa. There's almost consensus on that now. Some people say it didn't, but almost everybody says it does now. And also, there is evidence. There's evidence that the D haplogroup in the form of a marker called D0 also arose in Africa. So because there was once a puzzle where how could you have these two split similar times? I mean, it was causing a problem. And most recently, in a paper done by a man named Haber, look up the paper by Haber on a rare, deep-rooting Y chromosome haplogroup, DO. And in that paper, he argues persuasively that maybe nearly all of the current haplogroups that have been described based on downstream markers from M78, maybe all of them arose in Africa. Maybe all of them, most of them, but they left quickly. And so you don't see them in great numbers in Africa now, except when there's been a back migration. Haber's paper, rare deep rooting. What he did was he sounded the death knell. Nobody says that Yap arose outside of Africa anymore. Okay, next question.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's great. So the next question is going to be, I'm going to do Marcus Sharp. How might the behavioral immune system, which links pathogen avoidance to social behaviors like xenophobia, be understood in the context of ancient Egypt's public health practices, disease prevalence, and cultural?
Yeah, I can't answer that question.
Okay.
I am not a dynastic. I do not do dynastic Egyptology.
Oh man, chill.
Yeah,
Nope.
Chill had to.
Okay, let me go to another question then, so we can keep this rolling. Then we're going to get Brother Reggie. How much validity should a person put in the various DNA tests on the market? Specifically, this question is from Black T. Specifically to the connection to certain tribes within the continent of Africa.
Those studies, I regard those studies, I call them recreational DNA studies. This is the problem with them. All of the, I don't care which company it is, whether it's Rick Kittle's company or Ancestry 23andMe or West 1500, I don't care what company it is, all of them depend on a reference database. Okay, they depend on a database. So if your particular ancestors are not in that database, or the group that you might be affiliated with, that at a theoretical level would be wrong. I mean, you're not going to get the right answer. The other reason that I don't put faith in, but the real reason I don't put faith in it is because parts of Africa were shuffled and ethnic designations change all the time, even in the past. Okay, things changed 500 years ago, 400, 300, 200, however many hundred years ago, with few exceptions. So you might be able to get to a region, but to say that you've gotten to a specific ethnic group is problematic. And so I would not put a lot of trust or automatic trust in that. And you will get differences depending on which company you use. Some people have gotten their DNA done by 3 or 4 different companies, and they'll get 3 or 4 different answers. Okay, and does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was just a question from the audience. So
okay, yeah, well, yeah, and I can tell you a story about how it might happen, get wrong. Is there time for that?
Yeah, it's on you. You know what I mean? How long?
Okay, yeah.
Going?
Well, yeah, it is getting late, isn't it? So the thing is this. The issue is this. Many years ago, actually, I was having a conversation with somebody from Senegal, and in fact, it was during Ramadan. I said, "Oh, you're from Senegal. Oh, that's nice." We talked. I said, "Oh, what ethnic group are you?" He said, "Oh, I'm Wolof." And to make a long story short, it turned out that he was identifying with the language that he spoke every day. In actual fact, his family, his grandfather was a Fulani cleric, an imam, a scholar, an Islamic scholar, and his mother was from Lake Chad, which is about 1,500 miles away from Senegal. So in a database, if you'd come along and ask him, "Oh, what ethnic group are you?" he would have said Wolof, and you would have gotten the wrong answer. You see what I mean? Okay, so next question.
All right, so I want to go ahead, and Brother Reggie is here. And
I'd like to say big up to Brother Reggie.
Brother Reggie, go ahead.
I would like to say big up to Brother Reggie, and Dr. Keita might not know this. The first time I ever talked to you, Dr. Keita, was through Brother Reggie, and he got us on the phone. I was like, man, this was years ago. Reggie might not even remember it, and you might not remember, but I remember. Go ahead, Brother Reggie. What's on your mind, man? What's your question for Dr. Keita?
Hey, thank you so much. I'm going to talk real quick. Dr. Keita, this is the second time that I've been on a panel with you. The first one was with Beyond West Africa with Dr. Jahi Issa and Dr. Salim Faraji. And I was on the second panel. I don't think I was on yours the second day. So I'm so happy that you are engaging us learners. But in our learning community, there is this bad kind of argument that, or convention or thinking that you touched on, and I just want to drill down a little bit further on it, that people in Black Americans are saying that we are West Africans and Central Africans. We're not related at all to the East Africans, the Ethiopians, or the so-called ancient Egyptians. I say so-called because they didn't call themselves that, right? So you covered it, but I want you to drill down, because on the pop affiliator, right? The pop affiliated calculator, which you and Dr. Gardine and Dr. Anselin discussed and really introduced to us to dismantle the Shomarka report, because we start, unfortunately, at what we call ancient Egypt, right? And maybe there's other places to start from, because the parents of most of these important civilizations come from the Green Sahara, which you discussed. So I'm gonna talk real quick. And then they transverse from a lake communities to river communities, and when the climate changed, they just drop down. So just to shorten, what I really want to say is, how can the pop affiliated calculator help us beyond what you talked about in the Shomarka report to help us understand these close populations, instead of us making these arguments that, they came from the South, when the not the playa, right? The Western Desert is actually earlier, right? So how could the pop affiliator help us? And are there genes or DNA that's recovered in places that we can use that we haven't talked about? Thank you.
Well, the thing is that we use the pop affiliator. There are other such tools. You have to always be careful and make sure that they're good patents, and you may still get different results from different ones. So it may not help you as much, but you can kind of tell if you get a really bizarre answer, then you have to be on guard for that. But there's some other things, though, from a paradigmatic point of view, from a philosophical point of view, that we often don't think of if you're just going to talk about genetics. And it's this: if people have been in Africa, modern people, for 150,000 years, let's pick a number, 120, 130, 140,000 years, then plenty of time for differentiation. Don't expect, in fact, it's rather interesting when you do find people who are similar or related in whatever way over vast distances, okay? I mean, I find that rather interesting, because based on evolutionary model, I wouldn't expect that, right? Based on common sense. I mean, so when you do find it, that people were moving around. This whole thing about, I've written it, the Sahara, I conceive the Sahara as a metapopulation in a desiccating environment, people mixing and matching, I mean, on islands of places where they could live and not live, but fusing and splitting. So this is why you get diverse pictures. This is how you get an Asian lineage, if you want to call it that, the R1B, amongst all the linguistic groups. It's circulated all around. You can't use it to mark a single event, right? I mean, even though some people have written that or tried to do that. So I don't know. You use the pop affiliator carefully, but I think the more important is to have good models about the way you think, and try to cover as much of the genetic data as you can. I mean, those who are good with the computer, create your own databases and get somebody to help manage it. I think you're friends with Dr. Finch, right? Haven't I seen you with him?
I've spoken I've known him for a while and I've spoken, but I'm not a direct friend of.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I'm saying you can go to the next level now. Okay, by which I mean, okay, a lot of these frequencies have been published. You don't need to resequence anything. You can use published data. And if you get yourself affiliated with an institute, even as a, say like at Morehouse someplace, people like Rick Kittles can actually get the original data sets, but that doesn't mean that you're going to redo everything in calculation without supercomputer, right? I mean, there's some things you're not going to do, but you can most certainly look at the frequencies and run them through some very basic statistics programs and so forth, and uncover those patterns for yourself. Yeah, from my point of view, you don't have to have a PhD to do that, or any other type of degree. It helps if you're trying to get published, but if you're just trying to put things together, most certainly, as long as they're legit, then you can see certain patterns and things for yourselves, but you're going to have to supply models to explain certain things. Now, this P2 thing that I've been talking about since, I don't know, 2004, probably in that paper we did, Conceptualizing Human Variation out of the Genome Center. What I realized about this P2, the lineages that are downstream, this is Y chromosome, father to son lineages. When I realized this thing was all over Africa and even beyond, it told me that they shared common male ancestry. Okay, now that doesn't mean they shared all of their autosome or their mitochondrial DNA, but common male ancestry. So if I'm a little, not chauvinist, but just using what I have, it means that all of the regions of Africa are interconnected and beyond. I mean, even in parts of the Mediterranean basin. And they're connected not based on Europeans coming down, they're based on Africans going out. Okay. So I hope that satisfies you, Mr. Bailey.
No, that's a great statement to help us work our way into people just choosing who they are. And I know a lot of people are upset because of what we call Egyptomania, right?
Okay. Well, no, the thing is this. Look,
boy,
you know, the ancient Sahara is probably ancestral to many, many things. People came out of it. The plurality, if not majority, of the modern Egyptians males have the E haplogroup lineage, okay? And if they do, that E haplogroup ties back to an African origin, period. No two ways about that. Okay?
Right, but they made it, here's the funny thing is they made it to Chad. We know Mentor Hotel, at least we have a rock face on
oh yeah, no. I'm talking about something different. I'm talking about I'm talking about the basal populations,
okay,
before any kingdoms, before any known societies.
Right. That's what I was originally talking about, but I just wanted to add that in so we can discuss these things further for what we do. And I learned.
Oh yeah. Well, no, you know, people were trading, they traveled, they went to places.
Cattle, Tumili,
oh yeah, exactly.
Yellow Nile, Wadi Hawar, right?
Yes.
All those things. Yeah.
Yes.
Hey.
And
okay.
then you just have to be very critical of yourself and careful. That's all.
Yeah, we're gonna be careful.
Yeah, we're gonna be careful. We ain't gonna let you sneak the ancient Egyptians in West Africa, teaching them how to live. We ain't gonna let you do that.
See that? You see the pushback? We don't get a chance to.
That's the guy.
The issue is the movement. The issue is the movement of whole communities and identities versus what current day people interested in migration talk about, mobilities, where you can have multiple small scale successive movements to transfer ideas, genes, and people, but you're not talking about the whole place picking up and moving. So, you know, look at the literature on mobilities and see how that may help you with your argument. I am not against, you know, I'm always for the underdog, but I'm also I'm also for good evidence and good reasoning. I'm for what those young sisters did when they solved an unsolvable. That's what we should be doing. They solved unsolvable, but they systematically worked it through with the evidence, and now they have 10 proofs apparently, not just one.
Well, thank you so much for being a great mentor, now a great elder, and someone.
Don't call me an elder.
Well, they call me Mister. So
don't call me an elder. I have
my daughter
is 11 years old. See, I get tired of her calling me old. You can't do that. You can't do that.
Respect it. Okay, respect it. Thanks so much for answering my question. So I'll let other people answer.
Hey, Reggie. Hey, Reggie. You see how I interrupt you and let you just have that comment? See that, Reggie?
Well, as the fable goes, I allowed you to speak to Dr. Shomarka Keita in the early days. So
that's why I had to let you.
Maybe y'all will have another conversation.
Yeah, because we doing some things. Hey, look, now I got, and this is gonna be the last question, Dr. Keita. I know you. I don't want to take advantage, of your time, man. We really appreciate.
It looks like you got 11 questions. Just shoot them off. Just shoot them off real quick. Go.
All right, okay. All right, shoot your questions off, and we're gonna end it with Ngozi.
We're gonna end it. We're gonna let Ngozi ask the last question. So we got you, Ngozi. So we're gonna, but these questions, we're just gonna go through them quickly, if you don't mind. So, all righty. Okay, so I'm gonna go to this question from Chef. Can you ask him about the bell curve and does it hold any weight?
Okay. No, I don't believe that the bell curve holds any weight, even though that's not the kind of thing that I do. But the bell curve has been shown to be flawed, and what it doesn't do is take into account various aspects that could influence cognition and ability. Those are just some numbers on a page, and it doesn't take into account, because the people that wrote the bell curve are trying to say that there's some natural lack of intelligence or what have you. That's nonsensical when you're dealing with populations that have unequal nutrition, unequal everything. So that's how I dispense with that. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Being that
was a good one.
Was a range of skin color, were the ancient Egyptians racially conscious or conscientious? And was it used to build their society?
No. As far as can be told, you don't have discussions in ancient Egyptians, and you should have a dynastic Egyptian come and talk to you. They don't describe themselves in terms of colors. Would they have noticed it? Yeah, of course, I'm sure they would have noticed it, but they didn't build a society in that fashion, based on any words or anything that we could know. I think it would have almost been very difficult to have done that.
Okay, great, thank you.
They don't describe. Now, a lot of people have used that tomb painting where they show the different nationalities, and they've interpreted it that racially, but that's people from now bringing their own bias. So they've got Nubians, they've got Libyans, they've got Asiatics, and they say, oh, you see, they're depicting the races of the world. No, they're not. They're depicting the people that they knew.
Okay. That question was, pardon me if I get your name wrong. It looks like the god Moses. I'm just going to say that. So the next question is from Cedric Brown. Dr. Keita, what are the biggest unanswered questions about ancient Egypt? Or maybe you can give us one of the biggest unanswered questions about ancient Egypt from a biological anthropology perspective.
I can't say that. I haven't really thought about that. So when you say what's the biggest unanswered question,
it's several.
I can just give you one question that for me, I've kind of wondered about. I've kind of wondered about aspects of health across time, and not health that we really get from the skeleton, but I kind of wonder about how much did endemic disease cause problems that would destabilize and lead to like the intermediate period. I just wonder if that was a factor, but I haven't seen anything written about that.
Okay, great. So we got 2 more to go, and then we're going to go to our last question of the night. So
yeah, then I got something from Dr. Mayat too. One little small question.
Is that a question from Dr. Mayat?
Yeah, she just was basically saying the question was a lot of people saying that the Semites was Africans. What's your take on the Semites? Are they African? You consider them African?
This is very interesting. Depends on what you mean and how you mean it. And I don't know what she means when she says that the Semites were Africans, but I'm just going to take it from what you've said.
Okay.
If you accept the Afro-Asiatic linguistic phylum, 5 of the branches are in Africa and only 1 is outside, and that's the Semitic branch.
Correct.
That means that the Semitic branch's ancestor was pre-Proto-Semitic, was African and broke off probably from the same group that led to Berber and Egyptian, or Berber and Chadic. You pick your choice. There are like 10 different trees that you can come up with, okay? So from that point of view, somebody had to carry Semitic languages to the Near East, okay? And so, but does that mean that all of the Semitic speakers, okay, at time 0, the pre-Proto-Semitic speakers would have been Africans. At time 100, they would have been where they are, mixed with all the people where they are, okay? So that's how you have to think about it if you're thinking in terms of biology. But Semitic, you can say the Semitic languages are part of a linguistic African diaspora. And of course, many people want to hate you for that, for saying it that way, even though they write that Semitic is a part of Afro-Asiatic, and Afro-Asiatic arose in Africa. There are only a few people out there left, but there's some, and they have big voices, who say that they think that Afro-Asiatic arose in the Near East and came into Africa. But that argument won't make sense in terms when you look at the linguistic evidence very, very carefully. Now, as to who the Semites are, well, if you count the Semitic speaking Ethiopians, you know, they're Africans, but that Semitic language that they speak is said to have come from South Arabia a long time ago. Although there's one linguist that I know about, an older Euro-American linguist, he may be dead now, who argued that Semitic itself had come straight from Africa, from the Horn of Africa. Okay, next question.
All righty. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask the last question in the box, and then our last question from our panelists. So this is from Marcus. He tried again. This is his question number 2. Can you please speak to Abu Ballas trial? I hope I'm reading this right. And the connection, if any, between Megalaka Chad and ancient Egypt. You see it? Do you see his question? Because I'm
Mega Chad, Lake Mega Chad.
You're talking about Lake Mega Chad, Mega Lake Chad.
Oh, okay, because it's one word. Mega Lake Chad.
No. The connections in general, I would say we have to think in terms of general principles at that time. We had people in the Green Sahara, and the people left the Green Sahara. While they were in the Green Sahara, they probably exchanged lots of ideas, ceramic styles, etc., married each other. As the desert gets worse, you have people increasingly on small patches of land, what have you. They probably fused and merged, and these people wind up in the Nile Valley. Some of them wind up going south and west. Okay.
All right, thank you so much. And so Bobby, we're gonna go to our last question.
And north probably too, yeah.
All righty. And Gozi, are you there?
So yeah, let's get Brother Ngozi. Brother Ngozi is one of the early pioneers on the Amaral squad. He was the youngest member. We always called him the young phenom. And I promised him to have access to great questions that I know you got. This is one of the brothers that his deal is talking DNA. That's what he liked to talk about. And he was definitely one of the first persons that was actually spitting that fire with DNA at a very young age. I say 22 years old. Okay. So now you got your shot, Gozy, with all the conversations you have and all the talking you got and all that you got.
And let me say this. I work in concepts. I'm a biological anthropologist. I'm not a population geneticist, but let us say I have a good bullshit detector. Okay, so go ahead.
Hey, how you doing? Ramadan Mubarak. Baba
Ramadan
Keita.
Kareem.
Alhamdulillah. Allahu Akbar.
Thank you.
All right, man, before they get into this last question, man, hit the cash apps, man. Look at the super chats. Let me see what super chats came through. All right, who the hell? What you talking about, man? 7 jewels. Shejmo. 10 jewels for my right dad. Let me check the cash apps, man. Don't forget, we have an interview with Dr. Wilson today at 6 o'clock. All right, I don't want y'all to miss that. Make sure y'all show some love. because the world we live in ain't free. Yeah, that's what we're saying. All right, appreciate you, Shaw, man. That's some love right there. Appreciate that Cash App, man. Some love right there, man. Let me drop the Cash App right here. All right. See how y'all feeling today. We definitely gonna be back on at 6. All right. Get this interview thing in, man. Let me show you, man. Dr. Wilson, man. Interviews with the experts. Let me get this off the screen. Yeah, we debunking the funk on that misinformation on vaccines, point blank. No doubt about it. Make sure y'all be there. All right, on the Community Skeptics, interviews with the experts. All right. We definitely appreciate all the support, man, coming from both channels, man. We're trying to get 5,000 subscribers. On the Community Skeptics, make sure y'all like and subscribe, sa.neter TV. I'm holding it down on this particular network. Appreciate all the love from the people, man. Let's get this last question in, and we almost to the end. Let us see. All right, here we go. All right, let's go. After they got through all their Muslim talk in Arabic.
Hey, look, I follow you, Baba Keita. I follow your work. I was one of the first people to bring your video in like 10 years ago or 12 years ago. I just want
14, 15.
14 to 15 years ago. I'm in the process. I would like to become a bioanthropologist. I tend to get I did receive a associate's degree in biology, but I want to go further in my education to go more in depth with it. But I wanted to just ask you a quick question. I was a few credits away from getting my bachelor's, but that's another story.
Sure.
But I wanted to ask you a quick question because it's a lot of stuff going around about the back migrations in Africa.
Okay.
And primarily the Natufian population that we know had that was part of the haplogroup E family, which is African.
Right.
Is it safe? Could it be safe for us to include Epipaleolithic Levant and early Arabia West as Greater Africa when they're seeing like these Natufian signals in early dynastic Egyptians?
Well, what they're calling the Tufian signals are probably original basal Africans in the first place. Let me tell you why. Now, answer your first question is that I've already written actually in print in peer-reviewed stuff somewhere. I talk about an Africasian concept. I say there's no reason why we can't have an Africasia if there's a Eurasia. You see what I'm saying?
Yes,
in
sir.
Africasia. People left Africa and they got to Australia before they got to Norway. Okay.
Yes.
So there's no reason you could develop a whole line of arguments and perspective by yoking those two areas and then going north or looking north. You could do that. That's not done, but you could do it. But now, in order to do anything avant-garde, anything new like that, you got to have all your stuff typed. You know, your information. But yeah, so the answer to your question is yes. Now, when they talk about Natufian signals in Egypt, the question becomes, are they what they're really saying? In my opinion, okay, Natufians, late Natufian hunters have evidence of tropical limb proportions. Okay, they also now we have the DNA. They had certain craniofacial features, and those things got transmitted to the first farmers. Larry Angel wrote this in 1973. You familiar with him?
No, I'm not.
J. Lawrence Angel?
No.
Come for a second. I'm going to do something that I normally wouldn't do, but I'm gonna do this here.
God, I'm going to the stack of books there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me see.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me see.
That's a good thing.
I need to
Absolutely.
find it. Okay.
Got a mighty
Let's see
stack
if
of
I can
books.
find it. Let's see here. Against this background of disease, movement, and pedomorphic reduction of body size, one can identify negroid, parenthesis, Ethiopic or Bushmanoid traits of nose and prognatism appearing in the Tufian latest hunters. He's quoting McCown on that. And in Anatolian and Macedonian first farmers. Angel's own work. He's the one that trained me, by the way. Probably from Nubia via the unknown predecessors of the Badarian. Okay. Written in 1972. Okay. So my point is, and then what happened? We got ancient DNA out of those Natufians, these latest Natufians. And guess what? E haplogroup, including a P2, underived, okay, as well as some M78s, okay. You know, now their mitochondrial DNA might be local because men tend to move around more. But so you're looking at a process that may have happened a long time ago. In addition to this, Lauren Brace, who I don't always like, but who did in 1993. Lauren Brace says there seems to be a sub-Saharan element. And then and Schreiner from NIH, who I've actually been on a paper with, and I have my issues with him. But I think that he's done some excellent work and so forth. He also identifies, and there's another paper by someone else, a quote, Somali type element in these late Epipaleolithic people. So you've got all the evidence there that you can put together if you're trying to write a story. But you shouldn't be satisfied just with that, because so what if they're connected in that way? You want to do some other stuff. I mean, and even at that level, you want to talk about some other things. Okay. So yeah, you could call some Ali Mazrui talked about Afrabia. Yeah, you could do that. There's no reason why you couldn't. Those are arbitrary things. People drew a line in the sand. Those were decisions that were made. I mean, you know, and so you could begin to talk that way. You get some pushback. I mean, after all, Eurasia is a very interesting concept. I mean, what yokes Eurasia? Is it because there's no boundary? But there's no boundary between Africa and Asia either. I mean, it's a narrower passing, but there's no boundary. And so when you think Eurasia, what do you think people are really talking about? Well, in part, they're talking about Indo-European languages coming from the Asian steppes. So the ironic thing is that the Basque speak an indigenous Mesolithic aged language, and the rest of the European languages, for the most part, have their origins in Central Asia, or an ancestor came from there. Yet, when Seligman's thesis, and this is the fear, and we didn't talk about this, the fear of using the term Hamido-Semitic or Afro-Asiatic is that because of Seligman's thesis, the Hamitic hypothesis, that they came from Asia, you know, has been used to de-Africanize Africa. And that's the way Seligman wrote about it. Although Seligman, when you read his book very carefully, see if you can find an old copy from somewhere, Seligman himself says that not everybody thinks that Hamites came from Asia. He says some people say they came from East Africa. He said, and if that's the case, we're talking about a migration not from Asia into Africa, but a migration into Negro land. Those are his exact words. Okay, so in admitting that, he's admitting the possibility of African diversity. You see, he's admitting it, but not exploring it. And I have a paper that I sent to Ankh. You can get it from him, or you can email me. I can send it to you too. I've been having trouble with my computer, but anyway, he has it. It's a paper that I wrote on genealogy of ideas.
Okay, got that.
Just give that to him. Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
But yeah, if you go back to school, I don't know how old you are. I'm not going to ask you that. It's never too late. But the older you get, especially if you have a family, the harder it gets. But that's okay if you want to do it. Nothing's worth doing. It's not hard. Now you're in Atlanta, right?
I'm in Chicago.
Hey, Chicago.
Oh wow! You know, what I was going to say is that you probably could slip in, have a conversation with Rick Kittles to get the rest of and get into a lab training scenario, because he's a population geneticist in his own way. But anyway, you could do that, and we've made this almost personal conversations, but the whole world is listening. I have to be careful with our audience here. So anyway, but go ahead.
Yeah, Bobby Kid, I wanted one more question.
You can go. I just want to get the sources because people are asking for the last two things he mentioned, the sources, and then you can go ahead and ask the last thing.
In his paper.
Yeah, he mentioned two things. Actually, it's Juju that asked for the sources. So can you give those to us, Dr. Cater? Do you?
We can get them.
When you say, you mean the Larry Angel paper?
The title again of Haber's papers and the source.
Haber's paper starts off with a rare deep rooting haplogroup. So I tell you what, just go to Google Scholar, put in Haber, Heber, comma, rare deep rooting haplogroup, and you'll get it.
Thank you.
I think I got it. I just wanted to double check. And the source you just gave, Ngozi.
Wonderful. All right.
Oh, no, that's J. Lawrence Angel. It's called Biological Relations of Egyptian and Eastern Mediterranean Populations during pre-dynastic and dynastic times.
Thank you.
And he happens to mention the things about the Natufian, and he studied the Anatolian remains himself. I mean, Angel probably had his hand on every ancient Greek skeleton that ever existed. In fact, there's a fellowship named after him, but he's the one that taught me skeletal biology at the Smithsonian when I was in medical school. So he was a nice man too. He was nice. He was
you can go ahead and
Anglo-Saxon, but he was a very nice man.
So, Bobby Ketcha, with the community, we always been scientific enthusiasts to get people to want to get interested in the field of science, especially with studying like ancient Africa, just humanity as a whole. And I wanted to talk about about the principal component analysis, or the PCAs that's used. One of the major things that a lot of people try to use in the so-called underground community that they call the conscious community is DNA tribes, or not just GEDmatch, but DNA tribes that use 8 out of. I know you brought up the pop affiliator, and you brought up that the algorithms can change based off the calculators that's used. But a lot of people try to bring up DNA tribes, the 8 out of 13 STRs that was used to try to promote that the Egyptians, because the pathogens, because when Zawi Hawass additionally used it, it was based off pathogen and diseases that fell in line, or that shared affinity with populations that they classify as sub-Saharan Africa, primarily like sickle cell and malaria. But a lot of people, when they seen that, I try to tell them, we don't want to say things in a wrong way and look at these PCAs like they're absolutes, because the algorithms can change based off what you use. They have higher microsatellites now with higher resolutions that can give a better chart than what they did with the 13 or 8 out of 13 STRs at that time. So I wanted to ask, so could you go into detail of those STRs, or those short tandem repeats that was used, and explain, or could you tell the audience that doesn't represent the overall composition genetically of the Egyptian?
No, I can't talk about that in detail now, for two reasons. Number one, they used the coders, so they used what they had available. That's always the case. The other thing too is that I'm not a population geneticist. I know about STRs, and I know what certain things mean with STRs, and I kind of know the limitations. But what they got was what DNA tribes got is what they got using their patented algorithm. If you take the data from Zahi Hawass's article and run those in other algorithms, you may get some other answers. Okay, but the point is that overall, from my perspective, is just what it shows is that you have a background, and it may be a trivial answer, but there's a background that's deep, and the question becomes, can you always separate out the general human background from a specifically African background? Okay. However, I think that the DNA tribes thing was illuminating. I think the repeat study that we did, that Gordine and I did, is also, I happen to think that that's valid and true. But when you put all of the information together, so you have to put a lot of different stuff together. But there's no reason not to think otherwise. Again, people were in Africa for 150,000 years before they left, or longer, much longer. Modern people, there would have been a time for a lot of diversification, okay? A lot of diversification. All Africans, therefore, in different regions would not have been the same. north, south, south, or whatever. So wherever they left from, whoever left, the people that left are going to be, in theory, more similar to the people in superficial ways than all of the other populations. But there's this deep layer that's a human layer, right? There's the layer of the little different things that we use to make distinctions and talk about regional populations and stuff. So that's the only way I can answer that for you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate you. And assalamu alaikum to you. Peace to you, brother. Alhamdulillah. Peace.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, man, that was one of them fire interviews right there, man. That was the interviews with the experts, man. That's how we do it. Ain't no other way to do it, man. Make sure you hit the Cash App, man. Show some love, man. If y'all enjoyed the interview, man. If y'all can, make sure y'all be here at 6 o'clock, man. Another interview with the experts. We're gonna be debunking misinformation on the vaccines. It's important for your family to have the right information. Stop listening to people just talking and running their mouth on YouTube, having no expertise in the said subject, man. I think for our community to grow and be healthy, you got to have people to care about the community. And to have people to care about the community is vital. Caring about the community is not giving them misinformation on something you made up off the top of your damn head. That's not caring about the community. Caring about the community is make sure they have experts in the community that can explain to them what's going on around. There's people that actually go to school to understand certain things that's happening in our community, whether it be medical, whether it be engineering, whether it be anthropology, paleontology, all that. We have people that look like us that are in these fields. If you just stuck on, can't listen to nobody else, not unless they look like you, then we got answers for you. I'm stuck on getting good information. I don't think science has anything to do with whiteness or blackness. I think science has a lot to do with understanding the natural phenomenon around you. All right, so just make sure you'll be there at 6 o'clock. It's going down. Man, I hope you enjoyed this interview right here. It was fire, like they say, fire, all day, every day, man. Big up to the platform on sa.neter Studio, and big up to community skeptics, man. Hit the like and subscribe to keep us in the damn algorithm, man. And going out the door, man, make sure y'all show some support, right? Let me read the 10 jewels, all right? That's from the Moors first. Appreciate you, bro. Yeah. So, you know how I do it, man. I keep it funky fresh around here, man. Ain't no need of playing with y'all, man. Ain't no need of acting like it's this and it's that, man. I just keep it straight to you, straightforward, man. Because I care about, care about the baby to the point where I want to make sure they have the right information. Most people won't care about wanting to be the dude, the guy. We're having no education behind what they're saying. I stress education because education is essential. I always say, man, before you send your kids to those institutions sponsored by the state, make sure they reading already. I'm going to say it again. You had these little babies, make sure they reading before they even get there. Remember, children that are illiterate and can't read at a certain level, they're in juvenile detention at higher rates. I'm going to say it again. Juvenile detention has a lot to do with their reading levels. Those that go to juvenile detention, right, more often end up in jails and prisons. Now, here's a twist for you. Once they go to prison and spend some time, those that end up getting educated in prison return less. Let me say it right. Those that end up going to prison and raise their literacy level don't return as much as those who don't. So I'm saying there's a direct correlation with reading and going to jail. Huh. Yeah. Man, hit that Cash App going out the door, man. If you support it, make sure you're there at 6 o'clock to see Dr. Wilson, because it's definitely going down. Ain't no running from it. Y'all talk that talk, man. I'm going to make sure I walk that walk and make sure you have proper education, whether you like it or not. I like to be amongst the people who know the less. Did I say that right? I like to be with the community and educate them. I like to bring them the community of ideas by the experts so y'all know what y'all doing. Because there's a lot of trickery going on in the government and a whole lot of stuff, a lot of misinformation. We'll make sure y'all straight, man. Got to make sure y'all straight. That's what it is, man. So I appreciate everybody else, man. How I want to end this. We got him down. Yeah, we got him down.
Man down.
Man down.
Hit hum with the knowledge frown.
Get hung with the knowledge frown.
See the pseudos come around.
Hey,
Gun them down.
gun him down.
Force them
Gun him down.
See the
Source
pseudos
him down.
come around.
Source him down.
Gun them down.
Source him down. Hey,
Force them down.
source him down. Gun him down.
Clowns
Hey,
down, pseudo
clowns.
around. That's when it all gets crazy. Broke man
Crazy.
lazy. Stotos never phase me. Driving Miss Daisy. Bitch, niggas
Hey.
crazy.
Whoa,
Read the book, slick niggas gave me.
yeah.
Riding waves like the Navy. Knowledge
Yeah.
cool, full of bravery. Always killing pseudos, never maybe. Using gift science gave me. Staying right. Speak, I'm loud on the mic. Using gift
Hey.
science gave me. Always talking shit. Pseudo killers on top the gravy.
See the pseudos come around.
Hey, source him down.
Guns them down. Source them down.
Source him
See
down.
the pseudos come around.
Gun them down. Source them down. See the gun them down. Gun them down.
Man, look, I'm your host, Bobby Banger, man. I appreciate y'all checking out the interviews with the experts, man, with sa.neter, Keita, man. And with that, we out. Don't forget, man, I see you at 6 o'clock today with another interview with the expert, with Dr. Wilson, man. It's going down. We're going to be debunking the funk with that misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation in our community about vaccines, man. It's a lot. Scaring people to the point where people are more afraid of the vaccine than the actual pathogen itself. And that don't make no sense, man. Reading and writing is essential, y'all. Let's get back on that. Not only reading and writing, comprehend what the hell you think you're reading. You may pronounce the words, but you're not comprehending the sentences and the words in the sentences. That'll get you in trouble. I'm your host, Bobby Banger, and with that, we are out.